This is dedicated to the homies that was down since day one. Welcome to Drop D.
Podcast with your hosts, Rob Clark and Doug Campbell.
Hey, what is up? What's shaking? The baton has not been passed. It has been taken. Welcome to the JFK Assassination Research News and Notes Podcast. The podcast, Quick Hits. I'm Doug Campbell, and I am but 50% of your hosts. With me, as always, is the other 50%, Mr. Rob Clark. What up, Rob?
That is Bob to you, sir.
I do apologize. I misspoke. I misspoke. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic, Doug. Thanks for asking. How are you doing, buddy?
Man, I'm fantastic, and fantastic is fantastic, isn't it?
It is.
It is. Hey, we got a guest, a special guest. Homie, introduce our guest.
We do. From wallstreetwindow.com, Mr. Mike Swanson joined the show. Hey, Mike.
Hey, great to be with you. I've been listening to y'all's show since you started, and it's an honor to be on it.
Yeah, I think you could. Yeah, man. Mike was with the Lone Gunman and the Dallas Action from episode 1, dude. I know that for a fact.
Well, it's something. This show is unique because you all coming together, and it's a great overview of what's going on in the community, what's new, and sometimes what's old, and there's gems and old stuff too.
Man, isn't that the truth? Always a lot to learn. Always.
Oh, yeah, we got some more today.
Well, dude, let's jump right to it. Oh, also, guys, noted author. My God, noted author Mike is. Absolutely. The War State. That's a great book. Awesome book. I know Rob's read that. And your new one, Why the Vietnam War. That's a great book, too, homie. Well, all right, guys, let's get right into it. I think we have discussion topics lined out. JFK Assassination Research News and Notes. Forward-moving thinking. It's what we do. Rob, would you like to kick it off, bro?
Sure. Let's kick it off with some backwards moving thinking. Speaking of old stuff.
Hey, do I need that? Is this a segment of our thing? Do I need this intro right here for us? Is this some dumb shit?
I think you do. Yes. Please go ahead.
All right. Well, Rob's going to open it up with a segment of
That's dumb shit.
Here on Quick Hits. All right, Rob, kick it off, bro.
All right. I found somewhere in the archives, I believe this is from the Harry Livingston archives at Dealey Plaza, UK. Thank you, Bart. I found the outline for a book written in the early 70s, and I'm not sure that it ever did get published.
Oh, really? Very interesting.
It may have been self-published. It may have been just a manuscript passed around between researchers. I don't know. But I found the overview of the book. The title of the book is Murder from Within. Okay, authors Fred Newcomb and Perry Adams, 100,000 words, 1,200 footnotes, fellas, and it's illustrated with line drawings and documents and photographs. Subject matter: assassination of President Kennedy. Synopsis: hold on to your hats, fellas.
Okay, man, lay it on us.
This I don't know what this means. MS.documents by filmed and printed public records how Lyndon Johnson's Secret Service detail killed President Kennedy, altered the evidence, including the body, set up a scapegoat, and enabled Johnson to assume the presidency. You with me so far, fellas?
Yeah.
All right. Pardon me. Chapter 1. Planning. To escape scandal in jail, Lyndon Johnson promoted the Dallas visit for President Kennedy with the aid of John Connally, who maneuvered the motorcade route and timing, and of Dean Rusk, who sequestered the cabinet outside the country at the time of the murder. Okay. Chapter 2. Motorcade management. Johnson's Secret Service detail handled the Dallas motorcade by positioning vehicles, controlling communications, withdrawing motorcycle escorts, and restricting the number of witnesses at the scene of the crime. Chapter 3. I can see by your stunned silence you're totally enthralled.
Well,
Execution.
I'm
Yes.
going to talk about Dean Rusk in my section, so I'll be debunking this.
Okay.
And
Chapter 3.
I was
Yes.
focused in on this line over here, making sure I've done this shit right. So please go ahead.
Okay, Chapter 3. This is the execution. One of Johnson's Secret Service detail fired a shot into the air to simulate shooting from a building behind the president and to signal the president's driver. The driver elevated the seat where Kennedy sat and shot him in the throat. Connolly panicked, and he was shot by the driver to quiet him. The driver again shot Kennedy, hitting him in the left temple. Then a motorcycle officer fired a shot at the driver, which punctured the limousine windshield.
Well, he's figured it all. This author has figured everything out, certainly.
I know.
He's accounting for all known and supposed bullet wounds and vehicle strikes.
Yes.
He's thorough.
Damn, did Jim Fitzer write this fucking book? Okay.
Well, that's what you're making me think is, man, you think Fetzer was crazy? And I'm trying to think of the guy that wrote, what is it, A Pale Horse or something in the 90s. But
Yeah,
this
Bill
is
Cooper.
Yeah, Bill Cooper. It's like Bill Cooper stuff, but evidently, you know, that wasn't anything new. This kind of stuff was in the 70s too, huh?
Yeah, early 70s. And I've seen the researchers pull from this quote research here, including Fetzer, including Larry Rivera, and folks like that. Chapter 4, the films. Johnson's Secret Service obtained a major film of the crime together with other photographs. These are analyzed in detail to demonstrate the extent of alteration. Chapter 5, Parkland. Dallas doctors noted and described in detail the original wounds to President Kennedy. A small wound in the throat, a small wound in the left temple, a hole in the right rear side of the head.
Yeah.
So the body could be altered, huh? Johnson's Secret Service detail, under his direct orders, forcibly removed it from Dallas. Meanwhile, Connolly took immediate security measures to protect himself from Johnson's Secret Service. Chapter 6, Bethesda. As seen at the hospital in D.C. under the control of Johnson's physician, okay, the wounds in the throat, left temple, and side of the head had been enlarged considerably. In addition, holes were medically made in the back of the base of the head. Alterations were accomplished to make the body appear that it had been hit from behind rather than in front. Puzzled pathologists, unaware of the alterations, were further misled by Johnson's physician and Secret Service detail. That detail took custody of the autopsy materials, including films, and destroyed others. Okay? Chapter 7, Scapegoats. The Secret Service set up Lee Harvey Oswald, a planted bullet, and falsified photographs as scapegoats, and altered the presidential limousine. Johnson's commission to investigate the crime was unaware of all this altered evidence. Chapter 8, Consequences of Dallas. During his administration, President Kennedy resisted all efforts to use combat troops in Vietnam. Instead, all advisors were to be withdrawn by 65, beginning with 1,000 in December 63, a policy immediately reversed by Johnson and Dean Rusk. Chapter 9, Robert Kennedy. Robert Kennedy made an effort to investigate the Secret Service and to deal with Johnson, who later threatened him over the war in Vietnam. Part 4, the epilogue. The office of the Vice President is historically untenable, and its abolition is advocated as a means of safeguarding the presidency. Further, the powers of the president regarding making war must be confined to constitutional limitations. Restrictions on the Secret Service are also indicated.
You know what? I'm
Yes.
struck by how topical that outline is, and you know, some of the things you mentioned here: Secret Service destroying evidence, the vice president, the importance of the vice presidency, the office of the vice president. in safeguarding against the presidency. Is that what you just said? Read that part again.
I believe so.
Isn't that kind of applicable to today's news headlines in a way? It's interesting.
Yeah.
The parallel is
Sure.
interesting to me.
Yeah, the office of vice president is historically untenable, and its abolition is advocated as a means of safeguarding the presidency. Yeah.
That's in the context of the Gravy Seals and January 6th. That's pretty interesting to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's your dumb shit for the day.
Well, you know,
Well, was that written before David Lifton's book? 'Cause I'm just wondering, was this going to
Yes.
be the first book that would talk about the possibility of changing the wounds and doing all that business?
It was definitely written before his book, but yeah, Lifton was one of the first generation researchers back then, and probably was corresponding with these guys as well. Back in the day in the '60s and early '70s.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Lifton had some crazy theories back in the day, such as people dressing up as trees on the grassy knoll and shooting at the president.
yeah.
So, yeah. All right. Next up, anybody ever heard of Jerry Traynor?
No.
Doug?
It's not ringing a bell, my man.
Okay. I got an outside contact report from the HSCA dated 1/10/78 to Jerry Traynor in Alexandria, Virginia. Summary of contact. Mike Epstein of the Senate Intelligence Committee called to relay information he received from Jerry Traynor, an attorney in D.C. for Jorge Antonio Zamari Safi, a Cuban wanted for extradition to Guatemala on a murder charge. Epstein said Traynor told him that Zamari had information pertinent to the Kennedy assassination. I called Traynor at his law office, and he told me the following. He said his client has known Jerry Patrick Hemming for several years, perhaps since 1971.
Okay.
Hemming had told Zamari that he actually met Oswald in Atsugi, Japan, when they were both stationed there with the United States Marines. Hemming also reportedly told Zamari in braggadocio manner that he, Hemming, had been a part of the third backup team in the Kennedy assassination and was in a building somewhere behind the TSBD at the time of the shooting. Traynor said the information checked out Navy records, RE service 1963, something for GP Hemming. Signature Patricia Orr is the investigator on this. So what do you
Yeah,
guys think about that assertion?
Oh, wow, man. Man, I go back and forth on Hemming.
Now, so this guy's an attorney, and he's contacting government investigators on behalf of a client. That's kind of unusual in itself.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's odd,
Well, you know
It
what,
is
man?
odd.
We need I would think the next step would be more information on Traynor.
Yeah, because I mean, how well known in the public was Jerry Hemming in 1978? I mean, I don't know.
Well, isn't that
Unless you knew him, and this actually happened.
Oh, that's about the time he got into the DEA thing and got busted for narcotics trafficking. I think. I don't know what year that was. Actually, now that I should not say that.
Cuban guy
I don't
in
know.
jail for murder.
Yeah.
How the hell would you know Jerry Hemming if you didn't know Jerry Hemming? You know what I mean?
And this was what year? 78.
This was the time of the interview, but he said he met Hemming in 71.
Okay.
The other thing about it is where I live a couple years ago, down to almost 20, there was a plot. That's not the word for it. The sheriff in a neighboring county was arrested and put in jail for running a drug ring. There were several dozen deputies involved in this, and they were doing it for over a decade. Now, the way the whole thing broke is that some drug dealer was arrested by the FBI, and it was and he was in a federal case, and they basically told him, "You're going to go to," his attorney told him, "You're going to go to jail. There's no way out of this unless you got some real information you can give him." And so he became the snitch because of this. The point I'm trying to make is that you got a prisoner in jail. Why is he contacting these Kennedy assassination investigators in Congress? How can they help him? You would think he'd be wanting to make a deal with someone who can help him. They're not going to help him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's
well,
true.
why is he doing this? Why is he reaching out to them? I mean, what's he going to get out of it?
That's really interesting. My my mind's going in several different directions. So he met him in 70, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's when he got the information from him. And I can't remember the chronology. I want to think that by the time, because I want to think Hemming talked about his incarceration for the narcotics thing with the HSCA, but I might be wrong. So it'd be, because if the guy's in prison, he might have met Hemming at that time. But I can't remember what the timeline is as far as his incarceration. I'm saying it's possible Traynor may have been, he met him in 70, but may have been in prison with him at the same time or something. Maybe Hemming told him then. I don't know. Let me look that up. Hang on. You guys go ahead. I'm on.
All right, I got another quick one for you. Anybody ever heard of Hank Farmer?
Yeah, man. Recently. What? Oh,
really?
Is this the guy that had the broken down truck in Dallas that morning and was running around looking for a push rod?
Nope.
No? Okay, maybe not. It was Hank somebody. We read so much,
right,
I forget.
I
you know what I'm saying?
So this is an FBI document dated 11/22/63. Today at 5:36 p.m., Hank Farmer of 2862 Toronto Avenue, telephone, whatever, Dallas, Texas, telephonically contacted the Dallas FBI office and advised he was standing on the southeast corner of Elm and Houston at the time when President Kennedy was shot. He stated he saw Kennedy hit by the bullet and felt that the bullet had entered Kennedy's face. He stated he then saw Governor Connolly shot, and this shot definitely entered Connolly's back. Farmer stated, therefore, it is his opinion that the two shots were fired by two individuals from opposite directions. Farmer stated he wishes to speak to an agent with this bureau and states that he will not talk to the Dallas Police Department. So to support what he kind of said, I got an interview here with Tip O'Neill. Okay. Tip O'Neill was a former Speaker of the House under Ronald Reagan.
Ted Kennedy's drinking buddy.
Yeah. And this is from 1992 when he had an interview with Larry King, right?
You know what, man? I can't really.
God rest his soul.
That guy was a very prominent politician when I was growing up. But, I can't say anything bad about that guy. He was always fighting the good fight, it seemed like.
Yeah.
Rob's probably about to read something.
In New Orleans, Louisiana,
wrong.
numbers.
Hey.
No. Tip O'Neill was very good friends with Kenny O'Donnell and Dave Powers, who were some of course, John Kennedy's very good friends.
That's right.
And they went to this guy Jimmy's house for dinner. Kenny O'Donnell and his wife, Dave Powers and his wife, and my Millie, Leo Deal and his wife, and Joe Maloney and his wife. And in the conversation, we started to talk about what happened down there in Dallas. And Kenny said, I was in the 6th car with Dave. And King said, he was? He was. And he said, I'll always remember, he said, there was a bullet that came over the fence. A bullet came over the fence. And Dave said, I'm absolutely in agreement with you. I said, well, you didn't say that in the Warren report. I said, you didn't say that in the Warren report. I said, you denied it. And you said there was only one bullet.
Wow.
He said, He said the FBI came to us, referring to Kenny O'Donnell and Dave Power.
Yep. Yeah.
He said the FBI came to us and they asked us to tell that story. They didn't want to disrupt the family. I said, now, wait a minute. If that's true, then O'Neill says, well, no, wait a minute. Now, let me tell you the rest of the story. So Dave said, absolutely, a bullet came over that fence. The FBI said to us, no, you heard echoes. There's only one bullet, and don't upset the family. So he said, I went in and testified. I said, I never would have testified that way in a million years. I'd have told them what I thought I saw or what I thought I heard, but I was guilted into protecting the family. Anyway, it gets back. I'm writing the book again, and I called Dave on the telephone. I said, Dave, I'm going to put in my book on a chapter on Kenny, our conversation with Kenny and you. How do you feel about it? He said, Tip, I say the same thing today that I said that night. That's in opposition to what I said to the FBI, but no question, I heard a bullet shot over the fence.
There you go.
Boom. So, yeah, kind of supports the whole shot from the grassy knoll theory that's, of course, been abound for many, many moons in the Kennedy assassination and seems to, gain traction
away.
with every witness testimony that you hear.
Away.
It's not going away. No, that's
Nope.
for sure. But that's all the quick hits I got for.
Wow, that's amazing. The last two items, but especially that last one. You know, and I've read on forums and stuff, people think Powers and O'Donnell were quote unquote in on it. To this day, I don't get that thinking.
Yeah, I don't buy that. They were his friends. I mean,
yeah.
But it does make sense that the FBI would have said, you don't want to put the family through all this drama and nonsense. So let's just be done with it. Say this, and we're done with it. So it's crazy, man.
I agree, but that's so did Tip O'Neill end up writing that in his book?
He did.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
You know, the thing about Tip O'Neill, I mean, I wish this is a book I could be read this from, but in during this time frame, I remember seeing him on Larry King myself. I used to watch it back then, and this was about the year we invaded Panama, somewhere around that time. And I think that's when this interview would have been on there. The Oliver Stone movie had come out.
This was in '92, yep.
Yeah, so, and this could have been the same show, actually. But I remember him being on Larry King, and Larry King asked something about the Reagan assassination or started talking about it, and they didn't go into a big discussion about it. But I distinctly recall O'Neill saying that was a Bush operation.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, that's my memory, but I swear I heard him say that, and they didn't go any. I just remember that phrase. He didn't say what that meant, and I don't remember. Larry King didn't ask any questions, but I distinctly remember that. It could have been the same show as this one.
It probably was.
I have to go back and find a transcript, or try to.
Tip O'Neill gave zero fucks.
But that time,
man.
I don't remember how old he was by then, but he comes off that way too. He's just like,
oh yeah,
yeah, man. He was. I've always heard Ted Kennedy described as the Lion of the Senate. And O'Neill was that in the House, I think, because he was Speaker of the House for a long time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I guess we'd say he was the last great one, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. No doubt. I agree with that 100%. Wow. So that's, I don't know how you get more credible, than Powers and O'Donnell.
Yeah, it's a pretty heavy statement.
That's a pretty heavy statement. And then years later to go, damn right, and I meant what I said. A bullet came from over the fence. And you can print it, Tip,
Yeah. All right, Mike, what do you got? I know you said something about Dean Rusk. What do you
Yeah,
got, Mike?
I got two things. One's a little short document, so it won't take much time, and it's a good segue into what Doug's going to talk about. But what I want to bring up is two figures, Dean Rusk and Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who became a prominent senator. But when Kennedy was president, he was the assistant labor secretary, and I came. They're in a
Oh, I didn't
they're in
know
the
that.
book.
I didn't know that.
Huh?
I didn't know that
Yeah,
about Moynihan.
and actually in the '90s, at the time of the Oliver Stone movie or afterwards, I think he wrote an introduction to some assassination book saying it was a conspiracy. But I do remember somewhere him saying it was a conspiracy. But anyway, I heard or read uh, Vince Palomera gave a talk in the '90s that he's well remembered for, in which he asserted that the assassination was done by the national security state. And in the talk, he says that the cabinet plane, which Dean Rusk was on, which that 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 was part of that outline of the book you were talking about earlier. Um, but Palomera said that when the cabinet plane was coming back, uh, the whole cabinet was on it. They were going to Japan, leaving Hawaii. They just finished a meeting with Robert McNamara and McGeorge Bundy, people from the Defense Department about Vietnam. Now, Bundy and McNamara, they went back to D.C. already, and the cabinet plane now is going to Tokyo. And most of Kennedy's cabinet is on it, and they hear the news of the assassination on the way to Tokyo and turn around, go back to Hawaii, then fly back to Washington, arrive there the night of the 22nd. Now, Palomera told a story in his speech that during the flight, the press secretary, Pierre Salinger, is told by Bundy, who's in the Situation Room, during the afternoon, that they've arrested the man that did the assassination, and it's basically, case closed. And he says that's proof that there's a national security plot, and Bundy's, immediately covering it up. Now, what I decided to do was go back and see if I could find that and confirm it. So there's two books that talk about what happened on the cabinet plane, and one's The Death of the President by William Manchester.
Yep.
And the other one's this Bishop, I think it's Bob Bishop or Jim Bishop book. I don't have it sitting right in front of me, but it doesn't have that many details in it, and the story's not really in there. Now, so I went and read The Death of the President, and people don't read it anymore because it's thought of as a lone assassination book, but it's really worth reading. There's so many little stories in there that it is so well written, and I like to read something that you can almost there can be stories in there that you can picture in your mind like it's a movie going on in your head. So I couldn't confirm the exact thing Palomero was saying, but what I found was that there are all kinds of interesting discussions on the cabinet plane.
Oh, wow. I can imagine,
And so I want to hone in on Dean Rusk and Moynihan, who were on it.
Okay.
So Dean Rusk is Secretary of State, excuse me. And Douglas Dillon, the Treasury Secretary, is on the plane. Luther Hodges, Orville Freeman, Walter Heller, who was like the top economist for the Kennedy administration. So they land in Honolulu. They've gotten the news that Kennedy's shot. And Admiral Felt, the SINCPAC chief, meets with them. And he tells Douglas Dillon, take these pills. And they're sleeping pills and sedatives. He says the women on the plane might get hysterical and need them. So the Treasury Secretary gets back on the plane with these sedatives,
Huh.
and as the plane takes the rest of the trip, he eyes Dean Rusk, and he comes to the conclusion that Dean Rusk is on the verge of a mental breakdown over the assassination.
Really?
So he decides to slip one of these sedatives into his drink and knocks him out for the rest of the flight.
No shit.
Now, to me, that's pretty funny or amazing because in the chain of command, the presidential continuity, you got the vice president, speaker of the House, president of the Senate, then secretary of state. So if there was a plot or the Soviets are doing something, Rusk is a key figure in the chain of command, and he's having a breakdown over that, basically. Now, I'd done a lot of reading about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and Kennedy said during that, when it was over, that Rusk was basically getting drunk every single night and was useless. So here he is again, being useless. Yeah. Now, so I don't see how this guy's plotting all this stuff of LBJ.
Where would he have been in the line of succession? Fifth, second? I can't. Fourth. Okay, and he's doped up and passed out on the airplane.
Yep.
Just tore up, out.
Yep. Now, as the flights goes on, one group of the passengers, they basically, to me, I'm thinking of incorporating the story if I would ever write a book about the assassination. But to me, they're in an airplane. There's really nothing they can do. All they're doing is sitting there getting news from Washington, and the press wires are coming in.
And you know what else is happening is 50 million scenarios. Who is it? What is it? How big is it? Are running through their heads at this point too. They don't know what they're going to land and find.
Yeah, exactly. On one hand, the reported at one point, a lot of them start talking about what's it going to be like working for Lyndon Johnson. What's LBJ like? Now here's an interesting part of it. Under Secretary of State George Ball tells one person, we've got to get on top of the situation in Dallas. The cops are emotional. This is when after they find out that Oswald's been arrested.
Yeah.
This is what he's quoted. This is what Ball's saying. They don't believe in due process. They're so involved in corruption that they overcompensate when they run into something big. You can't depend on them. You can't leave the national interest in the hands of these policemen. The facts are so confused. If we don't move quickly on them, there will be no doubt trouble later. Establishing a case against the communists, against the fascists, against the president himself, now that being LBJ, against anybody. It might be an anti-Khrushchev faction, a Chinese faction out of Cuba. You can construct anything out of the possibilities, but you can be sure of one thing. Nobody can predict what the Dallas police will be doing. And they're saying the man is a commie. Doesn't make him one. This is before they knock Rusk out, actually. And Moynihan says he's right. I'm going to go talk to Rusk. And this is maybe part of the stuff that makes him have a breakdown. Go ahead, Don.
I was going to say he's exactly right about the Dallas Police Department and due process. I've been reading some of Bart's new anatomy papers. Rob, have you been digging into those that he sent us?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Man, the thing he said there about the Dallas Police Department doesn't believe in due process. All you got to do is read just a fraction of what Bart's written about Wade and Fritz, and that becomes really apparent. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Their clearance rate and conviction rate and the amount of hot check writers that ended up doing, almost a decade in prison. It's crazy. Those guys. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so Moynihan agrees with George Ball about this. And then they try to talk to Rusk, and he's unresponsive, and he gets, put unconscious later. And Now, Moynihan tells other passengers on the plane about this, and he kind of takes himself. He's going to do something about it when the plane lands, and he says we have to know the facts. What keeps a republic together is procedure, and we have chaos in Dallas. We have to move fast. And one passenger on the plane says, "That's far out." And Moynihan gets angry and he says, "You stupid son of a bitch! The freely elected president, the freely elected president of the United States is lying dead in a box, and you're telling me I'm far out? It's the far out events that make history. It's far out to say that Caesar is going to be stabbed in the Forum today, but he was." Now the plane lands, and when Moynihan gets off, well, they're all greeted by someone from the Treasury Department and the Assistant Treasury of the Secretary of the Treasury. The Assistant Secretary of the Treasury greets the plane, and he's also, it says, in charge of the Secret Service. And Moynihan goes up to the guy, tells him all this stuff, and he just dismisses him. And he says, "Well, we are in charge of the situation. My best man is in Louisville or Nashville and is on his way to Dallas." And just kind of brushes him off, and they get into an argument about it, and that's it.
Man, they were not in charge of that situation, though. The FBI took it pretty fast.
Yeah, so
even going back to Bart's papers, I mean, the Secret Service weren't even really around for Oswald's interrogations at first. You know, it was just the FBI and Bookout and Hosty, or Fritz and Bookout and Hosty.
They were worried about getting Kennedy back to Washington, getting Johnson back to Washington, and then once that happened, then they came back.
Now, was the 22nd a Friday?
Yes.
Or Saturday? Friday?
Friday.
Okay.
Friday.
So the next night, I'm almost done with the Moynihan story. The next night, it talks, the book, I mean, I'll tell you, this book is really worth reading. There's so much in there I didn't know, you know. It doesn't matter that it's a lone assassin book. So that night, it talks about Saturday night, the night after the assassination, what some of these different figures are doing and talking with and so forth. And it says Pat Moynihan has dinner with a reporter, Mary McGrory, and someone told me that back then she was one of the most prominent newspaper reporters. She was a big columnist, something like that Helen Thomas was in our day. She was supposedly back then. And Moynihan's having dinner with her and starts telling her about the Dallas Police Department. He's not satisfied about this Oswald thing. And he tells her, "We may never know who did it now. This could cloud our whole history for a century." And she says, the woman, McGrory, says, "We'll never laugh again." And he says, "Oh, we'll laugh again, but we'll never be young again." And then he predicts that Oswald will be killed in police custody.
Really?
Yep. And then
he was spot on.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then when Oswald's shot, it talks about the reaction of different figures to that. LeMay, it says General Max Taylor is in the Pentagon. He walks into the room that the Joint Chiefs of Staff have. They got a meeting room. LeMay's in there, and LeMay says, "Look, they just shot Oswald." And the generals watch the tape over and over again. And supposedly Taylor is thinking to himself, lawlessness was damaging our worldwide reputation. Mary McGrory, that reporter, writes notes saying, "The Republic is finished, will never be the same, it's all over." Moynihan, his phone rings. His wife tells him that Oswald's killed.
Wow.
Says he just rears his head back and kicks the wall as hard as he can.
You know,
Taylor says, well, one last quote.
Yeah.
General Taylor says, I felt for sure that there would be suspicion that the killing of Oswald by Ruby has been done to suppress something. Well, that's an understatement.
And that's a gigantic understatement. I was about to say, you know, when Oswald's killed, if you're a critical thinking adult in any capacity, how could you not think, you know, well, he was obviously killed to silence him. You know, your gut's going to tell you there's more to it than just Oswald in that moment. Right? You would think. That's amazing to me. That dude,
oh yeah,
totally.
Yeah, somebody else that predicted, you know, that he's not gonna make it out of that police department alive. There's no way. There's no way. You know. And that's amazing to me too that he predicted that.
Well, I mean, supposedly Paul, the researcher that Vincent Palmara did too, and it happened, but so did Moynihan, you know, and it's in print, you know, it's more than one person saying he did.
Oh yeah,
and it's, you know, the timing of it on that airplane when they're coming back. I mean, it's just wow. But I think the Dallas police, you know, some connection between them and whoever did the assassination is a fruitful avenue of research. And I don't mean all the police, but some of them.
Yeah, see, I'm like you. I've always thought that there had to have been an element of a control element in the Dallas Police Department.
I got one other thing I'm going to bring up too.
Yeah, man.
So when that last release of files, I think it was this year. Time goes by, or last year. I tried to look through them, all of them. There weren't really that many. I think it was like 1,500 or something.
Yeah.
But and I don't know how many are repeats that were released before. So I don't know if I'm looking at stuff people already looked at. But one thing that is new, that caught my eye is, I'll just give if people want to look this up, the last four digits is 10,084. And this is a November the 23rd, probably written in the morning, but it's a memo to General Taylor, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, from Major General Unger, and it says Director for Operations. Now, what he is, under the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a part of it, is the planning staff, the joint staff. And they are doing all the paperwork. It's like 400 people. They're coming up with war plans. They're executing the war plans. That's where the real stuff's going on.
Yeah.
And this guy's head of operations, not General Taylor, you know, it's this guy. And he's sending Taylor a memo. It says, subject, line of briefing items for President Johnson. So following is a list of items on which the president should be briefed. 4 items. Number 1, Joint Chiefs of Staff, emergency action procedures, and continuity of operations of the Organization of Joint Chiefs of Staff. That's nothing unusual. Number 2, Single Integrated Operational Plan, SIOP. That's the nuclear strike plan. Item 3, access to Berlin. And the 4th and final item, U.S. contingency plans for operations in Cuba and rules of engagement for U.S. forces in the Cuban area. Now, what's interesting to me is these are the 4 items that they think are the most important to talk with Johnson.
Right.
As soon as he's going to be president. And not on the list is Vietnam.
Not on the list is Vietnam. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Instead, you know, number 4 is basically plans to invade Cuba. It's like, that's pretty interesting.
That's counter to the narrative that we're told, anyway.
Well, I'll tell you. So what happens is Johnson doesn't meet with them for several days, and on the 26th, Taylor sends another memo about. Taylor sends a memo directly to Johnson about meeting. Finally, and Johnson, in the meantime, he has a meeting with the cabinet the day after the assassination, in which he does. It's all about Vietnam, not the cabinet. I'm sorry, with Rusk and McNamara, in Henry Cabot Lodge, about Vietnam, because Lodge has come back. So they do talk about Vietnam. He has a meeting with the National Security, some of the people in the National Security Council, Desmond Fitzgerald of the CIA, and it's about Cuba, and Fitzgerald talks about stuff like Castro supposedly sending arms shipments to South America, and he starts to bring up covert operations, and LBJ shoots it all down and basically says he doesn't want to do anything in Cuba. And then he sends a memo to the Joint Chiefs of Staff telling them that Vietnam is now his top priority. So he's the one telling them that. Now they get on the bandwagon as the weeks go on and kind of pressure him on the topic. But initially, the first day, they're all interested in Cuba.
And Johnson's not. And then suddenly that changes because Cuba operations just started dwindling away pretty fast in lieu of Southeast Asia operations. Went away pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I've always been curious about that. And I don't know if I've ever gotten and you guys can tell me any different, Rob, if you ever gotten a good explanation for that, why suddenly Cuba just wasn't important.
No, it's all news to me. I mean, I want to say, it's interesting. I've said this before, but it's always been interesting to me that, this so-called, communist country 60 miles off our shore, we supposedly tried to assassinate this leader, tens of 20s of times unsuccessfully.
Wasn't the final tally like 263 over the years?
I mean, be it by the mafia, be it by the military, be it by, civilians, I mean, clandestinely, openly, whatever you want to call it, it's, I believe that they were even running Cuba operations up into the early 70s. Yet somehow, Castro out-thwarted them all.
Yeah.
This one guy in this tiny little country seemed to make a mockery of us. I mean, we could have wiped him off the face of the earth at any time.
And he did make a mockery
quickly
out of him. He really did.
Yeah.
The CIA. When Castro died, one of the funniest things I saw on the internet, that website, The Onion, the fake, the comedy news website, they had this story about how the CIA had tried to drop a piano on his open casket during the funeral procession, but it missed and crushed and killed an old lady.
It doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
But stuff like that just makes you kind of wonder, like, were we really, really trying to get rid of these Castro guys, or was Castro working as a double agent, for us and for Russia, and giving information to both? Being on the same side of guys. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me that we could over influence Castro, being the fact that they're, he's so far away from Russia and he's so close to us.
Yeah, but that's always
physically
been
in the world.
It's such a poor place, man. There's so much there to exploit. That whole double agent thing with Castro. I don't know. He might have been, passing info back and forth here and there, but I don't know. Just I've never really, other than Cuba was a priority, and then it wasn't. And then maybe it's
Right.
maybe it is as simple as the military.
Vietnam took other prominence, and then we move on in time, and things fade away, and things get forgotten, and until it's something major happens, or then we move into the 80s, and we got the Iran-Contra stuff, Nicaragua's going on, and then Desert Storm, and it's just Castro and Cuba just kind of fade away because there's no more Russian missiles.
Well, the Russia threat is back in full force.
Well, Saddam's gone. Now you got Putin in China.
Yeah.
I think we should depose Putin simply for that awful plastic surgery. It's hideous. Hideous.
Maybe him and Oliver Stone have the same doctor.
Well, they certainly have the same producers. I'll say
that. All right, Doug, what you got, homie?
Oh, boy. Man, guys, we're having such a good time. I hate to be the buzzkill of the gang. I hate to be the buzzkill, but I'm afraid I must. Fellas,
Lord.
At the risk, again, of being the buzzkiller here, but I think I need to revisit briefly the recent what we were calling the Prouty Kerfluffle, Rob.
I smell Lay's potato chips and Coca-Cola Classic.
Yes, with a side of Mountain Dew. Dew. But I need to revisit it for just a bit, if I may. Okay?
Yes. Let's tie it up into a neat bow.
Yeah, well, there's been another development, another quote, guys, that and a question for, and I'm going to ask some questions at the end of this little segment here. You guys don't necessarily have to answer, but I would like for everybody to contemplate.
But
we will. But I'd like for everybody to contemplate, you guys and the listeners, moving forward. Now, as our audience is no doubt aware, the folks over at the website Kennedy and King, specifically James DiEugenio, was apparently in recent months made aware of a podcast episode that, Rob, you recorded 2 years ago, a podcast in which Rob asked critical questions regarding various things that were claimed over the years by Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty. Now,
it's very timely on their part to finally realize what happened
2 years ago. Now, although Mr. DiEugenio didn't listen to the episode, that's obvious. He was, however, moved to write an article in response to it, which I don't know how that works. And that article was called L. Fletcher Prouty versus the ARRB. Now, the only...
That just shows his research skills, apparently.
Oh, but well, hang on. Give me a minute, Rob. Don't get ahead of me. Don't get ahead of me. The only remarkable thing about this article was a claim that Mr. DiEugenio in the article makes in passing, a hypothetical that he refers to. And that claim was that had Prouty actually given a formal interview to the House Select Committee on Assassinations, that he would not only have recognized the CIA's liaison to the committee, which was retired CIA officer George Joannides, by sight, but that he would have outed him as a CIA plant with the presentation of this hypothetical that Mr. DiEugenio wrote in his article. Now, I want to read that section, okay, the section regarding Joannides from the article. Now, he's talking, what he's talking about is Prouty's disappointment with the various government committees over the years, right? From the Rockefeller Commission through the House Select Committee to the ARRB, this sense of disappointment that none of these official bodies were actually interested in the truth, really, right? And that's what he's talking about. And then he gets into one sentence regarding Joanides. I'm going to read that to you guys, okay? He's talking about the disappointment leading from the Rockefeller Commission through the other ones. And in the article, Mr. DiEugenio writes, as he, and that's Prouty, later revealed to Leno Sanik when Prouty then went into his pre-interview for the House Select Committee on Assassinations, he felt the same disappointment. He was probably the only man in the building who would recognize who former CIA officer George Joanides was and why he was really there. He only did the pre-interview, and that was it for him. He recognized what was going on under the surface. And then he moves in the article to the ARRB. Now, that's the only sentence in this article that mentions George Joanides whatsoever, right? I know, Mike, I don't know if you've read it, but I know Rob has. This sentence again. He was probably the only man in the building who would recognize who former CIA officer George Joanides was and why he was really there. Now, guys, to this, he was probably the only man who would recognize. This says to me, had Prouty seen Joanides, he would have recognized him, right? It suggests that because they had met prior to the House Select Committee on Assassinations, Prouty would probably recognize him had they run into each other, right? Am I reading that wrong?
I'm found it as you're speaking, and I'm reading that paragraph, and that's how it reads to me.
Now, the hypothetical is only mentioned in that one sentence, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's the meaning I take from the hypothetical.
Now, I want to jump ahead, okay? I want to jump ahead, guys. Let me adjust my thing here. We're going to jump ahead now to July 7th, okay? This is July 7th of this year, the July 7th episode of Black Op Radio. Here's what Jim DiEugenio says about the article.
And then I also talked about his encounter with George Joanides with the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which Len let me hear a phone call on that, which Fletcher talked about.
Here's the sentence again. All right? He was probably the only man in the building who would recognize who former CIA officer George Joanides was and why he was really there.
And then I also talked about his encounter with George Joanides.
Where? Where did you talk about an encounter that Fletcher Prouty had with George Joanides? Where's it at, fellas?
It goes from hypothetical to a real life situation. Okay.
Now, we should give listeners a little bit of background for those who might not know on who George Joanides was. George Joanides, he joined the Central Intelligence Agency in 1951. He was chief of the psychological warfare branch of JM Wave. He worked very closely with, in fact, he was the case officer for the DRE, the Directorio Revolucionario Estudiante. This was the group, the brigades and all those guys in New Orleans that Lee Harvey Oswald actually had contact with, right? He was their case officer. So when the House Select Committee on Assassination started, the CIA brought this guy out of retirement and made him the liaison to the HSCA. In other words, so if the HSCA wanted to see a file, then they had to ask him. If they wanted the files on a certain individual, they had to ask him. And then he would go back to CIA and, come back. He was the liaison.
So he was working in New Orleans and Miami, basically, right?
Yes, sir. Exactly. Yeah.
And as a CIA case officer for some of these Cubans, anti-Castro Cubans. Well, Prouty was working in the Pentagon under General Krulak. Prouty was a colonel, Air Force colonel.
Yeah.
It seems unlikely he would ever encounter Joanides, ever. Probably not even know who his name was. I mean, now you can find files. I mean, in these, in the declassified files the past couple of years, in where Krulak shows up in some files over, talking about operations in Cuba. I think Prouty's in one or two of them, but they're, what's the word for? They're so far away from what's going on the ground in Miami or New Orleans or the world of individual CIA officers and their assets that I would doubt they'd ever even know who he was. Much less what he looks like.
I would go even further than that and say that the notion that in 1978 that Fletcher Prouty would see George Joanides down the hallway and say, "Hey, that's George Joanides from the CIA." I find it's completely ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. But it went in a month. It went from this hypothetical, right? This hypothetical thing. Had they met at the HSCA, Prouty probably would have recognized him. To they actually had an encounter at the House Select Committee on Assassinations in 1 month.
I've got,
And
the thing about Prouty, I mean, well, for the statements being, why is he making these statements? It's to beat back any criticism of Prouty, I assume.
Well,
I mean, why is Eugenio making that argument to defend Prouty against any criticism?
Well, it's like propaganda, right? I mean, propaganda. The whole idea is to make a statement that's like weakly founded, but it's also an extreme statement. And when you do it like in an authoritative manner that insinuates heavily that it is factually based and it's based on real data, and it's not. I mean, that's what this is, right? Because here's where he says...
And he can't contradict anything else that Prouty didn't already contradict his own self on, as far as what he asserted, in his JFK assassination related insights, if you will. He's got to make up some imaginary encounter to give Prouty some kind of importance in the situation, when it's just ridiculous.
Well,
one thing about Prouty is, I should have put this. When the Oliver Stone movie came out, he's used as the basis of that X character, and I read The Secret Team, and then there's another book he came out with after the Stone movie, JFK. He's got Leonard Sanik has a whole collection of Prouty letters and material on a CD he sells. He was a prolific writer, and he was doing a lot of interviews for several years after the JFK movie. There was an outfit called Prevailing Winds Research that was selling taped interviews that people were doing. Some of them were radio interviews. John Judge, they had several cassettes of John Judge interviews and talks, and I was buying these things. And Prouty had an interview that John Judge did with him, and someone affiliated with Liberty Lobby, a talk radio host for them, did. And I was listening to all this stuff and digesting a lot of Prouty's writings. And honestly, on one hand, as I was trying to get into this material or the topic, he influenced me, and I'm not to explore the topic in a critical way of what caused the assassination, what's its connection to other events, But I didn't just read these things uncritically and accept everything that was said. For example, in that book titled JFK, he makes the claim that there's a high cabal that's basically controlling world events, and Alan Dulles answers to them. And he also claims that immediately after World War II, that there was a lot of surplus military equipment all over the world, and much of it was deposited in Vietnam with the purpose of creating a windless war, that it was planned out to be that way.
Yeah.
Right right then. And I don't believe any of that. Neither one of those things is true. And then from what some researchers like Walt Brown has said is that, I've never spoken to Prouty, so I can't say this, but he said things like, and wrote this, somewhere in his giant, 20,000 page collection. He's got a book
–
about his own journey, kind of in personal story.
That's a good section. That's a good section.
Yeah, it's really worth reading.
He calls it the kiss off and tell off section.
Yeah, it's really worth reading, especially for people our age, in the whatever generation we are. We're not the first or second.
Yeah.
But he says in there that what Prouty would do is never really answer his questions, just get him to ask more and kind of lead him on in what he thought was the direction that he wanted him to go, which typically would mean, it seems like almost everything Prouty writes and says is designed to get people to think that the CIA killed Kennedy.
Well, I think now that you mention that, I remember Walt, he said that Prouty would always end the conversation with the phrase, "But you're smart. You know what to look for.
You figured out.
You figured out. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you're remembering it better than me.
You know what to look for. Go figure it out." He said every conversation was just like vagaries, and then it would end like that. Well, you know what you. And here's the thing: that mental trick. He's already told you what he wants you to go figure out. See, in that conversation.
Right. Well, so. And then on one hand, I'm trying to make an argument how should we view Prouty. Yeah. On one hand, John McAdams was writing stuff saying Prouty's a fraud. Here's a couple of things he said that are wrong, and therefore he's a fraud. And he wrote something actually saying that he was making everything up about Vietnam, and that he had nothing to do with writing this McNamara Taylor report. Prouty says McNamara and Taylor, they go to Vietnam right a month before Kennedy's killed, write this giant report, and in that report is the discussion of taking 1,000 troops out. And Prouty says he helped he wrote the report, basically, is the way he makes it sound. Prouty's in Washington. They're sending tapes back to him. He writes the report. And in this Diogene article, somewhere that's referred to, it'll take me a minute to find it. It's not so much this article, but in reality, I found out who actually was in charge of the report. It wasn't Prouty. It was William Bundy. And this is in the book Death of a Generation. Now, the thing about which is a book about Vietnam. It's 10 or 20 years old by now. But that doesn't mean Prouty didn't have nothing to do with it, that he probably did, because the way they wrote those reports is they would have someone from the Secretary of Defense be a part of it, someone from the CIA, someone from there. It's a bureaucratic process. Yeah. It's not like William Bundy's
what he was asserting. What he was asserting that him and what was his boss? Krulak wrote this thing, flew it to Hawaii, gave it to Taylor, and then Taylor came back to Washington and presented it as though they had written it, which is an absurd,
Yeah,
you know,
but what I'm trying
scenario.
to, yeah, he didn't. Bundy was in charge of it. Taylor and McNamara's names are on it, but they, neither three of those, Bundy didn't write the whole thing. It's I wouldn't doubt that Prouty wrote some of it, but not the entirety, and not much less was he. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to say that
Yeah,
he's
It's
making
been
a bigger
exaggerated.
role. He's making himself have a bigger role than he really had.
He
did have a role.
Yeah, he's just
He's
exaggerating. Yeah.
So when McAdams says he's a fraud and he didn't do anything, that's not true at all. In fact, this Diogenio article talks about him testifying to the Rockefeller Commission, and I would say anyone listening, go find that Rockefeller Commission testimony that Prouty gave and read that. It's under oath, and there's interesting tidbits in there that he never says anywhere else. And I'll dig it. I'll find a link to it.
Find a link to it. Perhaps I will read it. Yeah, perhaps I will read that this weekend.
It's real interesting. But the argument I'm trying to get to is that Prouty was a historical figure involved in events himself. And I don't want to go on and on, but the very first discussion I ever had about the Kennedy assassination with somebody, I never thought about it once until I was a teenager, but I was speaking with somebody that was high. My dad was in the Pentagon. He was a colonel, much like Prouty was. I mean, didn't do the same job or anything like that, but he worked in the Pentagon too. And someone, he had a discussion with someone about the assassination, and he told me a little bit about it. But the person was when you're speaking with someone that's in the national security state, they got a bias to who they're working for. Prouty's working for this Krulak guy.
Oh, absolutely,
Prouty was in the Air Force, and they blame everything on the CIA, or he does. He blames everything on the CIA. And not that they're not at fault for some things, but you just got to be careful when you're relying on a historical figure that's involved in the events. You can't just take everything they say at face value. So, for example, when it comes to people in the Kennedy administration, I've looked at some of the oral histories, and Walt Rystow, who was an assistant national security advisor, he says things that contradict books, contradict other people's interviews that no one else says but him. For example, he claims that Kennedy would never have pulled out of Vietnam because he thought Kennedy exactly like Walter Rostow did about Vietnam, which he was extremely hawkish. And they were just one in this. Kennedy's thoughts are his thoughts, and
that's a little.
That's all not true.
Right, exactly.
So this is his is the most worst oral history interview I've seen, where I can't believe a word the guy says. And not everyone's, people got different levels of reliability. And a Prouty, I just think maybe there's some tidbits in there. It's interesting to read. I think it's more useful to read him and look at him as somebody who's a historical figure, who's got a bias. He's defending the military the way I read everything he's done against criticism. For example, he's made the claim that the Vietnam War was a CIA war until Kennedy was killed, and then they had to call in the military basically to fix the CIA's mistakes, and that the Pentagon Papers, he's suggested, I think in interviews that Lenz did with him, that was a CIA trick to make the military look bad too, because what's his face, who's the guy that leaked him?
Oh, Ellsberg.
Ellsberg
Yeah.
was a CIA. Ellsberg was a CIA guy. In around in the 60s, he worked.
Oh
under,
yeah, and he worked
he worked for Lansdale.
Yeah.
Yeah, he worked for Lansdale from like 65 to 67.
And Ellsberg and Peter Dale Scott are known to have been tight. And I've heard Prouty disciples say you can't trust Professor Peter Dale Scott because he was buddies with Ellsberg, and it goes because Prouty said so,
Yeah, the last thing about Prouty I want to say is that he's fixated on Ed Lansdale. He's basically making people think he's the guy that did this, mastermind the assassination, right, or put it together on behalf of Allen Dulles. And he tells that story where Lansdale sent him was his boss and sent him to the North Pole. Well, in reality, Lansdale was his boss for a period of time, but in the summer of 1963, Lansdale was in charge of a bureaucratic outfit in the Pentagon, when he was doing this Operation Mongoose business.
Yep.
And Krulak also was running a bureaucratic unit that's overseeing covert operations too. So there's two of them. And in the summer of 1963, Krulak says in this, I'll look this up after the thing, and so you can use them in show notes where I'm getting this from.
Yeah.
But it's a book about covert operations in the military. And they interview Krulak. He's a source in the book. And he brags in this book that in the summer of 1963, he got Krulak's unit to be decommissioned and all its operations rolled into his. And Lansdale was retired that summer.
Yep.
So he's basically without a job. I don't really know what he's doing for a couple months. He doesn't have any, he's not, I don't see how he's over Prouty because he's being retired. His unit's gone.
Well, and also,
and I think he's just, I don't see what, you know what I'm saying? I don't see how he could have ordered him to the North Pole.
Well, even then, the North Pole was not or the South Pole was not an anomaly.
The South Pole.
It was part of his regular duties. He had been the military liaison for that group doing that project down there since its inception. That was he told the ARRB, no, that was part of my regular job. He actually said there's nothing sinister about it. Prouty did. But you were talking about exaggerations a while ago, Michael. This thing in the Kennedy and King article on Prouty about him, the hypothetical, he was probably the only man in the building who would recognize who former CIA officer George Ioannidis was. Now, I made a public, what do you call it, Rob? Plea? Is that what it was?
Yes.
Request to see the evidence of this, right? And Rob did so in the Ed Forum also. Rob posted in the Ed Forum on the thread about this article, asked to see proof that, as the hypothetical meeting in the article suggests, not the actual meeting that it morphed into later on Black Op Radio, but the hypothetical meeting in the article suggests that Prouty had previously known George Ioannidis. And on June 8th, Mr. DiEugenio posted his response to that request, Rob, on the Education Forum. He says, I cannot reveal why, but I assure you, as per Ioannidis, Fletcher revealed this in a phone call with a third party, which Leno Sanik let me hear in preparation for the article. Fletcher did not want that out there for professional reasons. It was before Morley's work on the guy. I have evidence. I just can't show it to you.
Yeah. Okay, well then it doesn't count. How about that?
Let's hear
What's the title of the thread?
Fletcher Prouty and the ARRB.
Oh, okay.
Really? I mean, I know the 9 conspiracy buttflutz sycophants in the Ed Forum that he has. They'll believe it. They're going to believe it. But I want to know, when was this tape made? Who was Prouty talking to? What were they talking about that led to him to describing Georgia Joanides? I want to know the who, what, when, where, why, the date. Just, well, I can't show it to you. Here's my question about all this. And again, don't forget that what started as a probably would have ended a month later like this.
And then I also talked about his encounter with George Joanides with the House Select Committee on Assassinations.
No, he didn't. No, he did not describe any specific encounter. Here's my question, and you guys don't have to answer this. It's a couple of questions. But everybody else, just think about it. This, the morphing, I can't show you the evidence, you just have to believe me. Is this what qualifies as scholarship to this guy? I'm a scholarship with a capital S. Is this what qualifies as scholarship to us as an historical research community, as an historical research discipline? Does this qualify as scholarship, really? And also, I want you to think of other historic research disciplines, whether it be the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, military history, the history of the cavalry in the Old West, the history of the Indian Wars, the history of any historical research discipline. Would that qualify as scholarship?
Not from one of the supposed preeminent JFK researchers alive today.
Well,
would be my answer.
Writing your own bio on your website certainly helps that.
Right. Well, yeah. Claiming you're the best, you're the foremost authority on the JFK assassination, and reviewing other people's work and
butchering
very
it
of
like he did Newman's book. Butchering it like he did Newman's book. It's completely new. But to write this sentence, he was probably the only man in the building who would recognize who former CIA officer George Joanides was and why he was there. It takes about 3.5 weeks for that to turn into.
And then I also talked about his encounter with George Joanides with the House Select Committee on Assassinations.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't. Would that, let's say Civil War history, right? Those who study the Civil War. Would that kind of thing qualify as scholarship in that historical study discipline?
So, Doug, I'm just going to lay this out there. I'm going to put out another plea.
All right.
For people that hear this, demand this from Leno Sanik and Jim DiEugenio.
We want to hear it.
We want to hear the source. Play it on Black Op Radio. Prouty's been dead for 20 years at this point. It doesn't really matter what he wanted. He allegedly gave this stuff to Lynn, and you're just going to sit on it for perpetuity. Back up your claims, play the sound bite, and let other people decide whether or not it is what it is.
We need to know
that's my plea.
We need to know the context of the conversation. We need to show provenance of the tape. Is it time-stamped? Is it dated? Who was he talking to? What were they talking about? What year did the conversation happen?
Context.
Play it for us, or it didn't happen. That's it.
Boom.
It's made up shit. You play the evidence for us, or it didn't happen.
It's what they call hearsay in a court of law. And
it's not scholarship. It's not scholarship right now. Make it scholarship, gentlemen. Turn,
please.
turn the hot mess into scholarship, please, please, or go back to talking about a movie that was made 35 years ago. Or 25 years ago, sorry.
Yes.
But this is ridiculous. I can't show you the evidence, but you have to believe it. I wouldn't lie to you. All right, guys, listen. I think it's about time we take about a 10-minute break, play some promos. Not 10 minutes worth of promos, dear listeners. No, it's only going to take like a minute and a half. But we're going to break for 10 minutes. Through the magic of digital editing, I'm going to get to go hit the men's room and smoke a cigarette in that little minute and a half you have to listen to stuff. How cool is that, Rob? Mike, you going to stick around through the break for us?
Yeah, I'll be here.
Cool. What do you think, guys?
Yep, time to go see a man about a horse.
All right.
Sounds like a plan.
We will return right after this.
Certainly. Included is Jim Hogan on James McCord and Lou Russell, James Rosen on Lynn Kolodny, Ray Locker on Donald Segretti, Robert Jetlin on John Ehrlichman and the Wielander Confession, Phil Stanford on the Call Girl Ring Thesis, and Jeff Shepard on the problematic legal malfeasance of Watergate. But wait, there's more.
There's more. Indeed, sir. Also, Mal Hyman on how Watergate changed the media, David Denton on the CIA's post-Watergate issues with E. Howard Hunt, a very infamous figure, Mr. Ed Tatro on Leon Jaworski, and, of course, the introduction by Mr. S.T. Patrick himself. Boom.
Boom indeed. Go to MidnightRiderNews.com. That's MidnightRiderNews.com and secure your copy now.
That's Garrison, the Journal of History and Deep Politics Special Watergate 50th Anniversary Edition. Guys, you need this from Midnight Rider News Publications.
That's MidnightRiderNews.com. Peace.
Peace.
And now it's time for your Canadian radio moment of Zen.
But I heard some other guys had done a show about the lies of Fletcher Prouty, and I just laughed. I said, well, the show's over. They've just discredited themselves.
This has been your Canadian radio moment of Zen.
And hey, welcome back. Welcome back. It's the second segment of Quick Hits number 34. My name is Doug Campbell, along with my esteemed co-host, Rob Clark, and our distinguished guest, Mr. Mike Swanson. JFK Assassination Research News and Notes is what we do here. So, guys, let's get back into it. Also, quick reminder, guys, this show brought to you in no part whatsoever by Coke Zero. Not at all. They don't support us in any way. Guys, I want to mention we got some movie stuff going on. There is a new big budget Hollywood movie on the JFK assassination coming out that's about to enter production. Did you guys know this?
Yeah, I heard something about it.
Yeah.
What is it?
About, was it Giancana's nephew?
That's right. David Mamet, the big award-winning, super well-known, big-time respected playwright guy. Wrote Glengarry Glen Ross. He is going to direct the movie 2 Days, 1963, from a script written by Sam Giancana's grandnephew, Nicholas Solozzi. I think that's the way you say that. Here's a little bit about it. David Mamet will direct 2 Days 63, a drama scripted by Nicholas Solozzi that purports to tell how his great-uncle, the notorious Chicago mobster Sam Giancana, arranged the assassination of President John F. Kennedy as revenge for trying to bring down organized crime. The drama will focus on previously untold events that took place during the 48 hours before the assassination. Some of Solozzi's information comes from his late Uncle Pepe, Giancana's brother, who Solozzi said told him about the mob's complicity. See, apparently a bunch of mob guys were fanned out for 2 days before this happened, allegedly, and his Uncle Pepe, by default, because he was still in town, he had to be Giancana's driver. And so he was kind of a fly on the wall around Giancana during these 2 days around the assassination of President Kennedy. And this is apparently things that the uncle, which is Giancana's brother, told the great nephew. And it's going to begin production in the latter part, guys, of this year. Hopefully to be released in 2023 or early 2024.
Interesting. I don't
Very.
know how much stock I put into it, but interesting.
You know what?
Well,
I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
I'll
Well, we'll
watch
see
it. I'll watch it. I don't take it seriously.
No.
But I just want it to be, if it's going to be a good movie, then good. If it's going to suck, then I don't take these movies as being historically accurate or get worked up if they're not. It's like that Irishman movie I thought was really good. I really enjoyed it, but it had stuff it had a kind of a David Ferry character in it in one scene, and
for sure.
Its claims about the assassination were nonsense in that movie.
I can't remember the name of Joe Pesci's character, the guy he was based on in that movie. But at one point, he tells De Niro's character to meet a guy from New Orleans, a weird day. And it's funny because, Pesci played Ferry. But what did he call him? A Harry Ferry or something like that? David the Ferry or something? Or he used it as like a double entendre.
Yeah.
As far as
would have been much better if he reprised his role as David Ferry from the movie JFK in that movie, The Irishman. That would have been fucking sweet.
I know that he primarily got that role because he was coming off the big success of the Best Supporting Actor Oscar for Goodfellas, right? I get that, that they wanted the big name guys. It wanted an all-star cast of big names, but in retrospect, that probably could have done a little better than him, cast as Ferry. That tape, the thing that's on YouTube that's supposed to be Ferry's voice, it's nothing like that. Nothing at all.
No.
But looking forward to that movie, guys, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, there's also a documentary making waves in our field. Thought we'd talk about that for a minute. The Ruth Paine documentary by, The Assassination of Mrs. Paine. That's what it's called, by Maxwell Good? Max Good? Matt Good? Max Good, right?
Max Good.
Yeah. Okay, now I watched it, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was very, very well done. What'd you guys think? What say you?
I watched it too. I had the same opinion. I mean, I was like, whoever, I don't know who Max Good is. I've never heard of him before, but he put a lot of effort into it. And there's no doubt about that. The editing was done really well. It does not look like something you just watched on Netflix.
Absolutely not. Rob?
I mean, watched on YouTube.
I think I caught it on Amazon.
I have a little bit more of a critical view of the documentary itself. To me, if you take out the interspersed videos of JFK and his speeches and other films and other interviews of Marina and Ruth Paine that have been out in the public forum for many, 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 many years, and you whittle it down to his actual conversations with Ruth Paine and Michael Paine, they're a very small part of the entire documentary. Now, I understand, you got to add some backstory in there for folks that may not be as familiar with the entire story as people like us are, but and towards the end of it, he kind of alluded to the fact that he wanted to present her with some more of the conspiratorial questions that people would get mad at if he didn't actually address them to Ruth Payne, and she didn't address them either. So, but I was a little disappointed with that line of questioning. I don't think he went in far enough. I mean, at some point, you got to just say, look, here's the deal, Ruth. But I thought he could have gone into the Nicaragua stuff a little more. And to me, what makes sense, despite what Ruth Payne might say in the documentary, that my guess is they felt that they were doing something either that they thought was the right thing to do or they thought was the patriotic thing to do. I did think it was interesting that Ruth Payne knew what's his face, Alan Dulles' Mistress Mary Bancroft, and spent many summers on this island off the coast of Martha's Vineyard.
Her attitude about that was, man, she's spunky. She was like, okay, so my husband was part of a very wealthy family who owned their own island, and we could go there anytime we want. Big schmeal. That's
so my mother-in-law knew Alan Dulles. Well, that's a pretty direct connection there,
She's like, I can't help that. What do you want me to do about it?
Right.
What do you?
I think it's very possible. Now, look, it's been out there in the research community for a long time that, these defectors, when they come back, especially with a Russian wife or husband or whatever the case may be, a lot of times they're more interested in that Russian that's coming back because they think that, okay, like in Oswald's case, they met and were married within weeks. Marina had contact with two other defectors other than Lee Oswald, and they let her get out of the country quicker than it normally should have taken.
Right.
To get a visa to come to the United States with her husband. And a lot of times, the FBI and even the CIA would have been debriefing, of course, Oswald and Marina when they got back. But a lot of times the FBI would be tasked with kind of keeping an eye on not only Oswald, but Marina and just, checking in and making sure that, they're not spies or, what's going on. We know that their mail was being opened. Their phone calls were tapped. And it's not out of the realm of possibility to ask, this woman who has, just happens to have connections to Des Moines Shield in the Dallas area to kind of take this woman, this Russian woman in under her wing, kind of put a wedge between Oswald and Marina and maybe push things in a certain way. To me, that's not a far cry. Like I know in the documentary, Ruth Payne thought such accusations were pretty comedic. But to me, it sounds possible and even probable that something like that could have happened. Given Ruth's background with the Russian language and reaching out to, the pen pal program or whatever they were doing when she was a Quaker with, the Russians, and the fact that she spoke Russian and had contacts in the white Russian community in Dallas and her family's connections to the CIA, that it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. I'm not saying she worked for the CIA, but they could have asked her, hey, kind of befriend this woman, take her under your wing, and kind of keep an eye on her, see if everything's above board, see if their relationship is real, see if they love each other, see if they're acting normal, and just kind of let us know what's going on. I think that's definitely plausible.
I agree 100%. Yeah, man, that Ruth Payne chick, here's what I think, guys, or the Ruth Payne lady. She strikes me as an extremely intelligent woman. You know what? She's very, very articulate. She's very well spoken. For 90 years old, man, she hasn't lost a step. As a matter of fact, mentally, she's probably gained. And as bad as I hate to say this, no matter what I think about her or her complicity, or no matter what I think about her whatever role she might have played, which is definitely shady, I get a feeling that were I to meet her, I'd like her. You know?
Yeah, much like the researcher Joe Alessi, and she gave him a bunch of stuff like the metal file cabinets, a bunch of documents and stuff like that. But I Doug, I can't get past that little collage of Ruth Payne kind of explaining, how she felt when the police showed up at her door and they found this empty blanket in the garage. And they showed several different interviews where she recited the story word for word, emotion for emotion, tear for tear. That
was very telling. That's what I mean, man. She's smart. She's very smart.
Is, to me, is a rehearsed
absolutely
response.
Yeah.
Well, it's something she's repeated over and over and over again over the years. It's a story. She started, she, true or false, she has a narrative that began a few weeks after the assassination, and she repeats it word by word.
But to get emotional at the same points,
that's
the same
funny
points, and use the exact same words.
She knows where her cues are, man.
Well,
for the tears.
An event, 10 different times and never say it the same way.
She's a better. I can't act like that. I've never tried to.
Hey man, Joe Pesci can't act like that.
I'm gonna have the same emotional feelings now about something that happened, 50 years ago. I don't know about that. Well, there was one little. I agree with everything both of you are saying. There was one little tidbit in the movie that struck me, and I didn't know it, and that is. Ruth Payne tells this story that she saw Oswald typing a letter on his typewriter. I'm sorry, her typewriter. And the letter, when she looked at it, and it made her really angry. I don't really understand why she was so angered by it, but she wrote a copy of it by hand and then took it to the FBI. Before the assassination, and after the assassination, this was a letter Oswald sent to the Soviet embassy, and in the letter, it said he makes the comment that he had some sort of interaction, or I don't remember the wording of it. If y'all do, but instructions or a task or some strange phrase with Kostakov, who was this KGB agent in Mexico City, who also had some sort of involvement with assassinations of some sorts. Don't really know what kind of assassinations or simple murders this guy was doing or telling others to do. We don't really know any of that, but that's all we know. He's in charge of.
Well, it's like putting Bill Harvey in the in the Italian Rome embassy, but they did the same thing we did with their intelligence officers. They would put, somebody in charge of their executive action program at an embassy, and Mexico City was a hot one back then.
What was the thing that was really took me back though by this tidbit is this letter. Oswald sends it to the Soviet embassy, and immediately after the assassination, according to the book One Hell of a Gamble, which is about the Cuban Missile Crisis, but it has a lot of research done in Soviet archives. And according to that book, that letter made the KGB think that the assassination was a plot because they believed the letter was some sort of was fake. So it was designed to make this look like possibly the KGB was involved in the assassination. So to me, if it's true, I mean, this guy, this is the first time I ever heard this, that Ruth made a handwritten copy of the letter, sent it to the FBI, or gave it to them before the assassination even happened.
Yeah.
That's pretty remarkable, because it also suggests, if that story is true, that she may have been doing something sinister herself, or have been told to do it.
See, that's the thing.
To put it.
Been told, and in this documentary, and I actually wrote this down as I
That's
was
what I
watching
think.
it.
I don't think she's a sinister conspirator, but I think she was directed or told by others, as Rob says is probable.
Yep.
And they could have, and if they told her to do this, create this letter or do something, that's really.
Well, add that to the General Walker letter. Add that
to
the Marina.
Yeah, just magically falls out of a book, and there's other suspects that are for the Walker shooting more credible than Oswald. He had an associate that's been suggested he did it. That's who the police, I think, thought initially. They didn't solve the case.
Well, Bill Sipich, of course, as usual, he delivers the most grounded line of reasoning in the movie. He was great in the movie, and he basically agrees with you guys. Says the same thing that both of you guys have just said. Bill said, and I wrote this down because it struck me. He said, "I don't know anyone who thinks that the Paynes were part of the plot to kill the president, but they were for sure manipulated to do certain things." And, I got to thinking about, when I watch this, the one that strikes me as being the more sinister of the two, they probably are the one that got the Paynes wrapped up in this stuff, was probably Michael Payne. He's probably, however they got roped into being manipulated, it was probably through him. And, you think about it, like they said in the documentary, Michael Payne is from this wealthy family, but for ideological reasons, he won't partake of his trust fund. He leaves the money there. I didn't work for it. I don't want it. Right? And now they're separated. She's on her own. She's got the extra room. Hey, man, the government throws her some cash. Hey, let this Russian immigrant lady stay with you. I could see her needing the money, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But, man, the more I like watching him, especially in this thing, I think Michael Payne knew more, potentially knew more than Ruth does.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's more associated with Oswald. I mean, it really sounds like, honestly, I don't know these people, but the Ruth Payne to me is yes, she's highly intelligent, like you said, and even at her age, she's smarter than most people, most likely. But she also seems very strange. Her mannerisms are weird to me, and there's something just weird to me about. I mean, she was in her early 30s, and Marina's living with her, and she says she's living with her because she's lonely. It's just, I don't know, just kind of odd, but that's just.
There is some oddness going on there for sure.
Yeah, it's just odd. But Michael Payne's behavior is odd too, and he's supposedly, him and Oswald are attending extremist meetings of both left-wing students and right-wing John Birch Society types, giving speeches and acting kind of in a provocative way at these meetings, asking people questions. And I don't know, it's like, I think Sipich said it in the documentary. It's like they're trying to draw out people of interest by doing these things. Let's go to a left-wing student
provocateurs.
The dangle. It's just another a dangle up like New Orleans.
But I'm telling you, even if you look, I've gone to meetings of so-called political extremists myself. When I was in college, I went to a John Birch Society meeting. I went to a grocery store and I saw a flyer for one. I thought, I'm going to go that just to do it, And when I went to this meeting, I parked next to a pickup truck, and this guy got out of the truck, and I'm by myself, and I said, "Hey man, are you going to the Birch meeting?" And he's like, "Yeah." And then I walked up to him, and I started talking to him, and I walked in there with him, and I sat down with the guy. And I did that because I was by myself, and I didn't want to stand out like maybe these people think I'm a spy or something.
Yeah, really.
You know, I don't want to. I'm not trying to provoke people. I'm trying to do the opposite.
That fellow over there looks like he's Antifa.
Yeah, or a spy or whatever these people might think. You know, so they thought I was with him, but Oswald and Michael Payne, they do the opposite. Everything Oswald does, he's provoking people in the public record.
Yep.
And then and Payne's doing it with them,
trying to draw people
he's
out.
In Texas,
see,
so
and then
what
there's
game
a parallel.
Are these guys playing?
Well, there's a parallel to what Oswald was doing in New Orleans. To that, trying to draw.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
A dangle-op. You know, just a low-level dangle-op. But it does for sure seem kind of like the same thing. But, you know, as far as this, I would give this documentary a solid 7 out of 10 horns up. You know it? What say you fellas?
Yeah. Worth the $5. I wasn't demanding my money back afterwards.
That's right. Now, the only thing that disappointed me about it was it took 9 minutes to get a footage of Alan Dulles. It only took 9 minutes, you know. And that would be my only critique is it did that thing, guys, where, you know, anytime in a documentary it seems like the Warren Commission is mentioned, they'll show a picture of Dulles before they will Earl Warren.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they did that again. And you know what? It's only for that reason that I give it a 7 out of 10 horns up instead of 10 out of 10. It was a great documentary. I very much enjoyed it. And I think Michael enjoyed it too.
Yeah, I liked it. I haven't seen the one Eugenio and Oliver Stone have done yet, so this is actually the only new JFK documentary I've seen this year, and I'd say I'm glad it came out and it helps the case keep going and draw more interest into it. And this is probably the last time we're gonna be able to see someone who really does know something. Yeah. That's the problem.
Again. One last time.
We know these are the people that are left that know something. They ain't saying nothing. This lady ain't saying anything new. She's still hiding something, and it doesn't mean she's. Look, they quote Michael Payne calling her saying that after the assassination that they know who did it.
Yeah.
And they're not talking about Oswald so.
Yeah, and that is a very very damning thing, that phone call. To me as well. We both know who was responsible. That tells me they were speculating. We know, yeah.
Yeah, that's the phrase, responsible.
Somebody set him up, is what that tells me. So maybe, I don't know, maybe one day she'll come clean. Who knows? Who knows? There we go, Rob. From what you told me, your sack is full. Is that correct?
Well, I got one more thing to sneak in here before.
All right, yeah. Sorry about that. I jumped the gun. Go ahead, man. Do your thing.
All right. Now this lends credence to the whole paranoid conspiracy researcher. Doug, have you ever, being in this field that we're in, have you ever thought that maybe you might be getting monitored by the CIA, or, that maybe you're getting too close to some things, or, just wild ideas.
I did have one episode early on that I would upload, and it was like within the first 50. I would upload, and it would probably disappear. and that happened 4 times before it stayed up. And that made me go, hey, what the hell's going on here now? But that's about the only time. That's about you know.
I mean, here we are almost 60 years out, and I think some of the paranoia about things that we discussed is pretty much gone by this point. But back in the 60s, if you were looking into this back then, you probably would have been a whole lot more paranoid with all these deaths associated with the assassination and people inquiring into things they probably shouldn't be inquiring about.
Right.
So I came across this interesting thing from November of '68, and there was this fella by the name of Emory Brown. He was a researcher, a first-generation researcher back in the day, and he had some pretty, let's just say, outrageous ideas when it came to the conspiracy to kill President Kennedy. And he did some outlandish experiments, okay, when it comes to see if he was being monitored by the federal government. Okay.
I already like this segment.
So
okay,
he came up with the idea. He got his hands on a paperback book that had been that was the property of Marina Oswald, and he believes that there was some kind of a coded cipher.
I knew it. A code. I knew it, dude. We had a code. All right.
Yeah. So this guy, he calls himself Osprey. That was his nickname for himself, Emory Brown, right? So he decides to write to the American Cryptogram Association, headquartered in Bethesda, Maryland. So he sent all of his research to them to have them look it over and see if he was on the right track of things. And they kind of shit on him a little bit. They basically say, all in all, it doesn't look too promising, especially since at least some government experts have already had a look at this whole array of documents and have found nothing worth the bother. We are aware of criticisms of the Warren report. At the same time, one must leave them open the possibility of deeper, less public investigation, which has yet turned up nothing publishable. If there were continuing work, relevant documents would probably not be public. Possibility of outsiders, especially amateurs, contributing anything would be very small. If you would like your materials returned, please let us know. Good luck solving. Right?
Well.
So, yeah. So we have a Tennessee connection here, Doug.
It wasn't me.
So Mr. Emory Brown, codename Osprey, decided to send his buddy, who lived in Knoxville, Tennessee, a letter. And included in this envelope was a cipher. Okay. And he also put a microdot underneath the postage stamp. Okay. And basically what it says is the message is all a fake, but it states that a former federal employee took photographs of classified material relating to the Oswald case, and that these photos may be available. When the government breaks the cipher, if they are reading his mail, if they got it, they may take more of an interest in me, and I would like to see what happens from this.
Oh.
Okay.
Man, he's got all this shit figured out, doesn't he?
Yeah. So basically, on the back of the letter that he sent to his buddy in Tennessee, he sent a message that he had written in invisible ink that appeared when it was exposed to heat. Okay. And after he got the letter back, this is the white sheet that was used to develop the return pink sheet upon which the cipher was placed. The failure of the cipher to appear indicates that it was developed by someone before being returned to me. Now, the guy he wrote this letter to didn't know anything about there being a hidden cipher on the back of the letter.
Right.
So that would indicate that somebody in the government got a hold of this letter and put it through some tests before it got to where it was going and returned eventually. He also says, I took a piece of exposed 35 millimeter film and punched a microdot from it. It was then sealed beneath the stamp, but was removed by someone and the stamp reattached by the strip of Scotch tape, which was used to close the torn end of the stamp. So
somebody's reading this stuff, man.
yeah. So basically, the envelope was returned to him. It says addressee unknown. So what he might have done, his buddy in Tennessee might not have even existed. He sent this to a Mr. David Harrison, 302 12th Street Northwest, Knoxville, Tennessee. In the envelope, it says return, addressee unknown. Letter opened, torn on the right end, resealed with Scotch tape. And there's a stamp that says return to writer from Knoxville, Tennessee to Farmington, Delaware. Okay. So basically, whoever he wrote this letter to, they didn't exist. So he was just mailing this thing as a test. So apparently somebody was watching him and opening his mail and seeing what the hell was going on. So he sent all of this information to Harold Weisberg in November of 68. He says, I have enclosed copies of several pieces of correspondence from the American Cryptogram Society and the National Security Agency. They state that they are well aware of the Grill cipher technique, of which CE111 seems to be an example. However, they do not consider it likely that CE111 has any cryptographic implication. It really restores confidence in one to know that the people who coordinate American intelligence have been doing their homework, doesn't it? Ha ha. The last set represents another fruitless request to the DPD for some information about the several suspects that were apprehended near the scene of the assassination on the 22nd. He says, in closing, I would like to tell you of an amusing experience or an amusing experiment I carried out this past October. Since taking an interest in this matter, a number of pieces of my mail have been, quote, damaged in handling, and I have wondered if it was accidental or not. As you may know, the pink copy-mate paper will retain any message exposed to it until it is developed onto one of the white sheets by the heat process. I typed up a cipher message, and after transferring it to the pink sheet, typed a fake letter over the undeveloped cipher. Then, after sealing a microdot under the postage stamp, I sent it to a fake address so that it would be returned to me. When it came back, the microdot had been removed, and the pink sheet did not show my cipher when it was developed, which seems to indicate that someone else worked on it before it was returned to me. Since you often use copy-mate pink sheets when writing me, I often wondered if perhaps a message was on them, but none developed any. If you're able to publish the book when you mentioned in your letter, I would very much like to buy a copy of it, blah, blah, blah. Sincerely yours, Emery Osprey. So I just thought that was a little interesting research footnote.
So was Weisberg hip to it? Was he like, hey, man, there might be something to that?
He was kind of placating this guy, saying, it's an interesting theory, but the guy really couldn't back up anything, cryptologically that he was finding in whatever he was analyzing. So I don't think Weisberg put much stock in it, but yeah, it was interesting to see what these researchers were doing back then, for sure.
For sure, man. This guy was he was dedicated. He was smart.
Oh yeah.
I want to check out that. I want to see that cipher he found in Marina's book.
Great. Well, CE111, whatever the hell that was. So check it out.
Check it out, guys. I'm trying to find what page of note, my notes on the wrong page, Rob. Here I am. Now I'm right. Now I'm good. Well, that was certainly interesting. Microdots. I need to research that. So you take the stamp off and the microdot falls, right? And then, so when you get it back, you take the stamp off, and if the dot's not there, you know that the stamp's been removed, or how does that work? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's commonplace, to supposedly put microdots of film underneath stamps, you're trying to send somebody.
It's where you're hiding them.
So,
okay. Yeah.
Right. So
I think it's
they
easier
may look
just
at your letter, but there's nothing in there. But they forget about the envelope.
Yep.
it'd be easier for the guy just to assume it's all being opened and just not worry about it.
Yeah, I think the whole side being torn off the envelope's a giant indicator that somebody was in there.
Somebody's reading your shit.
That's
If
just
if the envelope was in two pieces and taped back together, you might have a problem.
God damn.
Pumpkin. Holy
Yeah.
cow! All right. Speaking of problems, is it time for emails, Rob?
It is.
Let's-
My bag is itching.
Let's do it.
Oh yes, wait a minute, Mr. Postman.
Emails. All right, Rob. Lay it on us,
All right.
buddy.
After some very lackluster couple of months here, we are back in business, Doug, on the email front.
I think spring break fucked all our listeners up.
Yeah. All right. First up from LA Dodgers, Matt. Greetings, Rob and Doug. Seat of government, SOG, in an FBI document circa 67 refers not to the U.S. Capitol, but rather to FBI headquarters in D.C., which was then ensconced in the DOJ building. I've never met Napoleon, but I plan to find the time. Pretzel logic, Steely Dan, and a picture of an owl with his head turned sideways looking at me. Funny. Not sure what this is referring to. Maybe we mentioned something about SOG on a previous show, but
We did.
my memories of
It was a
my
document
memory's
that was.
about as long as my Peter, and that means it's very short.
Oh wow, I can remember all kinds of shit. But hey, I can't speak for you. But now, there was something other. We were reading the document that was prepared for the seat of
Old Long
government.
Dong Campbell over there.
Hey man, what can I say? I'll never touch bottom, but I do rub the sides awful well. But yeah, there was a document that was prepared for the seat of government, and we were speculating as to what that was, and we Googled it and read what it said there on the old Google machine. But thank you for the email there, Sideways Owl guy. Thanks.
Yeah, and son of a bitch, here's another one from him, back to back.
Oh, busy guy.
Gents, I think the above review captures the bizarre anti-Kennedy ethos of the 60s. I am not suggesting any Bircher's direct involvement in the JFK hit, only the crazy historical setting in which it took place. Now he's sending me a link to a book by James Mann called The Birchers and the Trumpers.
Oh wow,
he says,
really? Rob, can you pass that along to me via email?
Sure can.
Awesome.
Who done it? I, of course, do not know, but I know this much. The Bethesda autopsy was deceptive quackery, and the directionality evidence of JFK's head and throat wound is suspect, not to mention the back wound for which there is no provable path.
I
The Warren
agree.
Commission, HSCA, Clark panel, and AARB never resolved all the contradictory medical evidence. If a bunch of angry Cubans directed by rogue CIA handlers were the actual conspirators, how could they be sure that the autopsy would be so compromised? What would be the motive for botching the autopsy if it were not a conspiracy involving the U.S. military? Or was the poor choice of the three pathologists dumb luck, incompetence for the conspirators who wanted to place the blame on a single shooter despite evidence to the contrary? Again, something we touched on in this show is the fact that the pressure from, people like the FBI, maybe coming down from Johnson, was that they didn't want to put any more undue stress on the Kennedy family. Not to mention point out any gigantic evidence of more than one shooter.
Yeah, we got to make this guy the realization that they had to shut it down and make this one guy the one lone shooter came quick. And I'm sure that realization came down before Air Force One did in D.C.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was decided on pretty quick that the best thing to do would be to shut all speculation down and just say it was one lone nut guy. Because it was cover your ass mode at that point.
Yeah. And if you don't do the right things during the autopsy, then you don't have to address them. So there you go. That's why a lot of these wound paths, the bullet paths through Kennedy's body, were not explored
right
in the autopsy. He says, devil's advocate question: how does Oswald's handler get LHO into the TSBD? In search of employment, Wesley Frazier travels from far away to his sister's residence in Irving, which just happens to be a few doors away from do-gooder Ruth Payne. He goes down to a local employment agency and quickly gets a job at the TSBD. Wesley's sister mentions to Mrs. Payne in passing that her brother says they might still be hiring. Mrs. Payne calls Roy Truly, and LHO has a ready-made sniper's nest from which to become infamous. I'm not a lone nutter, but I can't easily get past this logical obstruction. If LHO is being set up by handlers in New Orleans, Dallas, and Mexico City, was it a fluke that he landed a job at the TSBD on the motorcade route? Is this more amazing evidence of dumb luck? I can't find a way for a conspirator to move the Wesley Frazier pawn onto his appropriate square. And if I can't get Frazier there, how do I get LHO there? I think this is an important question which has vexed me for at least 40 years.
You know what? It's a very important question. Walt Brown, I remember talking to him. I can't remember if it was on the Dallas Action, Rob, or just on the phone, where he made a comment like, you know, that's the most important. You have to get your patsy in the building, right? You have to get your patsy in the building. And he said, you wouldn't think they would leave it up to just this schmuck Frazier with his 7-year-old Oldsmobile. Right?
Right.
So is there more to Frazier? I mean, if they're going to pull this off and they have to have the patsy in the building, they're going to make damn sure the patsy gets to the building. Because otherwise, you got to call it off, right? Unless you got other shooting teams in there, like at the Trade Mart or somewhere, and a patsy there as well. You know, theoretically, hypothetically, but that's a damn good question, dude. Like, what part did Frazier play? If Dr. Brown's analysis is right, that there has to be more to Frazier because you're not just going to leave it up to any damn body to get your patsy in place.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, what was alluded to in the Ruth Payne documentary is that, you know, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, okay, you know, that this speech that JFK was going to be giving at the Trade Mart in Dallas, okay, if you land here at Love Airport, you have to get from Love Airport to the Trade Mart. What's the best route, or what's the most likely route?
Right.
You would come through, you know, the middle of the city, and you have to go down Houston to turn to Elm to get down onto the Parkway to take you, you know, to the Trade Mart. So you have to go past the School Book Depository building. That's the only way you can go. So if you don't go down Elm Street, if he would have continued on Main, there's curbs there that would have prevented them from, you know, getting on the expressway. So Elm Street was the only way to go. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, okay, we got to get somebody in this building, this building, this building, or this building, you know, to make this possible. And again, you know, Ruth Payne is the purveyor of the knowledge that, hey, you know, she takes upon herself to call Roy Truly and send Oswald down there, you know, to be employed. So again, it's suspect.
Very suspect. Great email, dude.
Very
Thank
suspect.
You, sir.
Yeah. All right. This is from our dear listener, Svetlana Bendova Hurts a Lot. Hello, boys.
Easy for you
I
to
hope
say.
everything is going well. Yeah. With you in this crazy world today, I want to take this opportunity to announce my new film, which is scheduled for release in November of next year on the 60th anniversary of the assassination. It is a biography of sorts, covering my early days in Minsk when I was attending Sparrow School with Marina back in '59, and continues all the way up to and including the events of November 22nd, 1963. Yes, you got me. I was a Russian spy. My code name was Dallas. I performed sexual favors for many powerful men in hopes of learning secrets from them. You will see in the film. Also, I covered the investigation in the plaza following the event with a special focus on the meticulous gathering of evidence in and around the plaza grounds. And yes, this includes the discovery of the bullet which made the noticeable mole track under the lawn near the south curb of Elm Street. I hope you will be looking for my film playing in the fall of 2023 in a theater near you. I chose the title as an homage to the books of Josiah Thompson. My film is called Three Fingers in Dallas. Love, Svetlana.
Thank you for the email, Svetlana.
Yes, we will be looking for it. All right, we
If
got
you
another
pay
one
us
from
money,
Matt, LA
hey,
Dodgers
Svetlana,
fan.
you write us a check,
Yeah,
we'll run a promo for it.
hell yeah. Three Fingers in Dallas. I love it. Like I said, another one from Matt, LA Dodgers fan. Good morning, gents. This does not prove the authenticity of CE399 doing all the magical things claimed by Arlen Specter, or definitely being fired by the alleged Carcano, but certainly pokes a hole in the chain of custody argument promulgated by Jimmy D and Oliver Stone. And he sends me a link to a Washington Decoded article called "A Single Photograph Disproves Oliver Stone's Conspiracy Claim." Now, this claim is that that the initials are not on the bullet.
Elmer Todd.
Elmer Todd and Robert Frazier.
But Elmer Todd's are,
and
right?
They are.
Yeah.
They're both on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, some high definition photos were released from the National Archives showing very clearly the initials of Robert Frazier and Elmer Todd on the quote unquote magic bullet.
Right.
So there's another one that Jimmy D and Oliver Stone got wrong. So thank you, Matt, for that.
Thank you very much, sir.
We have another from Matthew Knoll referring to the SOG, seat of government. Man, I've read that Hoover referred to himself and the FBI as a seat of government.
That is not
a
shock.
Way more than I. So I'm probably misremembering, but that factoid would make sense of the communication you mentioned early in the latest podcast. Regards, Matt. Not a comedian. Maybe Sweatpants will weigh in for comic relief.
Maybe. You know what, dude? Mr. Matt, I can totally 100% see J. Edgar Hoover considering himself to be the seat of government.
Yeah, right on his face. Okay. Next up, we have an email from Michael Burns. Dear Rob and Doug, I've been a listener to your respective podcasts since around 2015, and I finally worked up the nerve to reach out and tell you how much I enjoy your work, especially this show, Quick Hits.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, the research and commentary is fascinating and enjoyable. The emails are funny, and hearing your reactions can bring a smile to my face. I'll cut to the chase, and some of the emails you receive are ponderous and wordy, including this one. I'll try to keep it short and sweet. By the way of background, I'm nowhere near where you are in terms of knowledge and insight on the assassination. I'm playing T-ball, and you guys are in the majors. I became interested in the assassination.
No. Thank you for saying so, but we are just as befuddled as everybody else. That's why we study it.
That's right. He says, I became interested in the assassination again in 2014 when I became aware of the bizarre case of Yuri Nisenko, the KGB defector or false defector whose case divided the agency for years. James Angleton was convinced he was a false defector sent to mislead the CIA away from a high-level mole. Nisenko claimed that the KGB had no interest whatsoever in Oswald while he was in the Soviet Union. Personally, I find that hard to believe. I don't see, however, what use the Soviets would have had for Oswald after he returned to the U.S. Clearly, they would know the U.S. intelligence would watch Oswald closely upon his return if he was a legitimate defector, as presented in the Warren Commission report.
If
Marina Oswald, however,
if Oswald,
I strongly suspect.
I'm sorry, but I don't mean to interrupt, Rob, but if Oswald was intelligence connected, then that would be his value once he got back. because it would be an operative or an asset that they turned while he was there. So I would think that would be his value.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
He says, Marina Oswald, as we've alluded to earlier in the show, however, I strongly suspect was involved with Soviet intelligence. How exactly, I don't know. Well, here it is. She had relations with 3 United States American defectors. She met 3, had relations with 2, and married 1. The odds of that happening to one poor little Russian girl in 1959 in the Soviet Union are astronomical. So that right there tells me all I need to know about Marina Oswald.
Do we know that, the proverbial missile made it to the silo in all 3 cases, though?
No, that's why I say she had met 3, had relations with 2.
Okay. Yeah.
Oswald and Webster, and then
we know
of course
this?
married Oswald.
We know this.
Yes.
Webster.
Yes.
The Rand Corporation guy.
I don't know that she banged him. I know that she dated him.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Probably. Then I would guess probably. Again, that's what these sparrows would do, these honey traps. Meet up with these Americans and sleep with them and try to get any secrets that, they might spill.
So to speak.
He says, I read Tenant Bagley's book, Spy Master, which makes a solid case that Angleton was right about Nosenko. I've also read this massive CIA report, The Monster Plot, which presents the contrary case. My question to you both is, where do you stand on the Nosenko case and the CIA's reaction? It is a wilderness of mirrors, as Angleton described counterintelligence work. My thought, why did the CIA spend several years trying to break Nosenko and have him admit he was a false defector? Why pump him full of drugs, sleep deprivation if he really was a KGB plant? Why not appear to believe him, debrief him, and let him somehow lead you to the mole? What was the point in torturing him and then turning around and accepting him as legit? What information did they want him to disclose? Was it regarding Oswald and the Soviets, KGB, Cuba? Thanks for taking the time to read this email. I wish you both continued success in your work, and thank you for doing what you do.
Oh boy.
P.S. I sent this on 5/9/22, but I got a bounce back. Then I just heard your new show that said you only received a couple emails, hoping this time it actually gets to you. If you choose to use, that's up to you. Thanks again. Oh, so maybe, Doug, it wasn't our listeners slacking. Maybe there was something wrong with the Gmail.
Maybe.
But we got you now. We got you now, Michael, and we're good to go. Now, I wish we had our good friend, the lovely and talented Miss Caroline Chiason here to
for the Nosenko stuff. Yeah.
Answer your Nosenko questions. I'm not really familiar. I haven't really paid it much attention or really researched it as much as she has. So maybe we'll have her back on in the future and really get into some of this.
Yeah,
Nosenko stuff.
that would be a good idea.
Good.
That'd be a good idea, man. Because I'm undecided on his. To paraphrase Richard Helms, Nosenko's bona fides. I did listen to Helms's. I believe it was his House Select Committee on Assassinations testimony. It might have been Church Committee, but I believe it was HSCA where they grilled him pretty hard on Nosenko, and that is a very dramatic session. But I kind of want to think Helms thought he was for real, but Angleton did not. But man, I don't know. That guy's a mystery for sure. We need to have Caroline back on. That's what we need to do.
All right, next one's up from AC. And I'm going to paraphrase it at times, AC, so don't get mad at me. It's a very long email, and time is of the essence. So
it is.
Greetings, Rob and Doug. Hope all is going well for you both. As usual, I've been enjoying all the podcasts the two of you are involved with. Appreciate the knowledge, verification, and informed speculation y'all share. Doug, it was awesome listening to you, Larry, and David Boylan pumping out that knowledge here recently on the Dallas Action.
Thank you, brother.
And
we got
Rob,
Ted Rubenstein coming next week.
And Rob, your recent episode of The Lone Gunman with Gil Jesus was great. And allow me to be your hype man here for a moment and give you a big shout out for your interview on the William Ramsey Investigates podcast. I thought you kicked some ass on there. So I've held back on expressing some items that have somewhat irritated me concerning the podcast north of the border. But now that the proverbial door has been kicked open, I hope y'all don't mind me sharing my opinion. There was a time when I listened to the Jack Me Ops radio podcast sporadically, but quit listening for about a year and a half ago.
Is he talking about Boar?
Yeah.
Boar? Okay.
I'll just list a few things here that led to my decision to quit wasting precious moments of my life with Jack Me Ops radio.
The door's not been kicked open. It's been kicked down, homie.
Yeah. Number one, Glenn O'Cannon. He had, quote, he had Fred Litwin on his podcast like he's some kind of expert. Yes, Glenn, it is Rob's podcast after all, and he's free to bring on any guest he chooses. Actually, Fred has written 2 books on the JFK assassination and has many years of research under his belt regarding the subject. Regardless of whether his current view falls on the lone nutter side or the conspiracy side. And while on the subject of podcast guests who are not, quote, experts, let's be sure to remember, Glenn, that, quote, that people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw rocks. Number 2, Glenn O'Cannon. Word is that you're willing to help out JFK researchers, but only if they fall in line under you, kind of like a pyramid scheme. Number 3, Glenn O'Cannon. When I went back a bit and heard your reaction to the news of Gary Mack passing away after battling an aggressive form of cancer, something along the lines of, quote, maybe we'll get someone in there and get some real research done now, unquote. Man, that came off as being spoken by a piece of shit. And I truly hope for your own sake that you've developed the capacity for some empathy since then.
Dude,
Probably
for
not.
real, man. For real. I mean, homie did an hour per week, 2 weeks in a row of just dancing a jig on Mr. Mack's grave. It was just stomach turning is what the fuck that was.
Yeah. By the way, Gary Mack never had an issue with allowing researchers on both sides being granted access to study what the sixth floor had to offer document-wise. And I'll let you in on a little something else, slapnuts. If you ever visited with him enough, then you just might have walked away with the feeling that he didn't actually believe that Oswald acted alone. Number 4, Tim, do you mean it though? I'm pretty positive you are totally aware of Rob's name, considering past history on the forums, and not to mention the fact that you were to the tune of Limp Bizkit, trolling. I really don't foresee you engage Rob, Doug, or anyone else above the age of your college students in a formal debate of some type soon. So in the meantime, let's put on our big boy pants and have enough respect to address grown men by their goddamn name. Number 5, Tim, do you mean it though? Accusing someone who didn't roll out the red carpet while reviewing a work you were involved with as not being qualified to do so is asinine in general.
No shit, man. No shit. Jeffrey Shanks has, I've said it before and I'll say it again, the man has more degrees than James DiEugenio's thermostat. Unqualified. I'm sorry.
Emphasizing that being a college-educated archaeologist disqualifies them in particular is really reaching and really fucking funny to me. Please tell me that you're not passing this everyone deserves a first-place trophy, and how dare you constructively criticize me attitude on the college students.
I hope this.
Number 6.
I hope this individual that wrote this copied and pasted and sent it to osanic@proudy.org. I hope he sent it over there too.
Yeah. When you sit down to do some researching, do you put on the artist formerly known as Prince and sing 2000 party over, oops, out of time? So tonight I'm going to research like it's 1999. Now,
that'll be a soundbite I'll isolate for later.
God damn it. I'm not saying that there were no I'm not saying there were no CIA players involved with the JFK assassination, but to still be holding on to and proclaiming the general consensus of CIA primacy is symptomatic of C, cranium, I, inside, A, anus, primacy, and research. Wow. Head and ass. Now I suppose you can be cut a little slack due to your older college degree from a time when history was taught to be static and never viewed as different from how it was then proclaimed. but modern college degrees and new information combined with critical thinking and analysis have shown otherwise, homie. Number 7, Beavis and Butthead. I had noticed about 3 or 4 little chicken shit comments directed toward 2 of my boys who happen to be very amazing JFK researchers and podcasters, kind of rapid fire on some episodes. And the final Jack Me Ops episode I partially about 15 minutes listened to was right after the 2020 U.S. presidential debate. Tim D'Amelio talked about rising up post-election morning, strapping on his shoes, and walking to the beer store to purchase a 12-pack to celebrate. Sounds like a Sublime song in the making to me. He then brings up how another set of impeachment charges should be the order of the day. Glenn O'Cannon then goes on to this cringy loud voice, yeah, do it, do it. And I'm just thinking, hey, Beavis, put down the candy corn and reel that shit in, Cornholio. The world is still enduring a pandemic. The United States is in severe need of uniting, regardless of who's commander-in-chief after a horribly divisive election year. And the millions of dollars cost of a post-presidency impeachment could be put to better use, in my view. But not according to these 2 happy asses. I mean, Glenn probably feels like his country is like a loft apartment above a kick-ass party. But really, Tim, to my wonderful brothers and sisters of Canada, take no offense to these comments regarding Glenn. Each one of you are in my prayers and thoughts as you face trying times with Lil Castro, Trudeau. Stay strong. In conclusion, I know Rob and Doug have done a great job countering the bullshit these 2 spewed forth. It's really sad Glenn and Tim can't give credit where credit is due, motherfucker, regarding what Rob and Doug bring forth to the research community instead of feeling threatened and reverting to childish antics. It seems they have forgotten that the sought-after product of this thing of ours is the truth of the JFK assassination.
Boom.
And somewhere along the way, it appears they have made themselves the product to be sold, and in doing so have betrayed the true goal of all of our research and hard work. Thanks for your kind ears and listening to my ramblings. There were more, believe me, but I ain't even going to tell tales of shitty T-shirts, etc. Just wanted to explain I exited the Jack Me Ops podcast a while back and how I just couldn't take it anymore. Because when trying to listen, I'd get the urge to run in the garage and grab my Little Lane Black and Pecker bruised toolbox, open it up and pull out the needle nut pliers and work myself over until feeling tranquility once more. Keep up the great work, guys. You motherfuckers are appreciated. Sincerely, AC.
I know this is somebody I know because I've told them the shirt story.
Well, you got the initials.
I do. I need to figure that out, I guess, don't I? Is it AC Cowlings?
Maybe.
OJ's buddy?
Oh, Al Cowlings. Yeah.
Maybe Ace.
Next up from
shit, it's Ace Frehley. I'm sorry, go ahead.
From Kiyoshi 7, JW.
All right.
Gentlemen, let me first say I am a huge fan of all 3 podcasts, and I am a law enforcement officer and have been for 27 years and have been a very amateur researcher for a few years.
Awesome.
I have watched every piece of recoding I have been able to get my hands on, reference LHO at the Dallas police station. Rob had a former officer on his show who wrote a book about LHO's body language during this time, and I totally disagree with his findings. My training and experience show me that LHO was taking advantage of a situation and having a good time with it for a while. We all know that LHO was always looking for the spotlight, and now he had it. But later you see his demeanor and body language change. This is the point I think he realized the totality of the circumstances and realized he was indeed a patsy. Anyway, that's my 2 cents worth, and keep up the great work, guys. JW.
Yeah, that whole thing where when that moment that the reporter told him, yeah, you've been charged with Kennedy's murder, and oh shit, you can really see it in that moment, in just that head movement, the eye movement, the facial expression. At that moment, I think oh my God, they really are going to pin this shit on me.
Yeah, and one thing, JW, I don't know that LHO was taking advantage of a situation and having a good time with it for a while. I think I don't think he was having a very good time in custody from the get-go. If you go back and watch all of the little news clippings and snippets of video from them shuffling him around the police station that day.
Even that footage that was discovered not too long ago, where he comes out of the elevator on the third floor of the DPD, and there's a clock in the background. 2:03 is when he got to the third floor.
Yeah.
He was not happy. He was not having a good time in that moment when he stepped off that elevator. No. He was already black and blue, shirt's ripped. I mean, they've beat the shit out of him at this point. There's really no telling what the hell they've said to him at this point either, that we don't know.
Right.
No, I don't think he was having a good time at any time that afternoon. I have to disagree with you there, buddy.
He may have thought that, they'd arrested the wrong man and eventually they'll let him go. But I think once he realized that wasn't going to happen, and that he'd been set up.
When he realized the cavalry was not riding in.
Yeah, I think that's when his demeanor changed, and yeah. But thank you, JW, for your service and your kind words and your email.
Absolutely.
Last up, Doug.
All right.
Last up, we got one from Angel Corrales. Dear Rob and Doug, I wanted for a long time to write you, but I thought it'd be better if I caught up first with your research a little bit before doing so I don't sound like an asshat. I added that last part. I've been binge listening to all 3 podcasts for the last month, and it's safe to say that I am responsible for much of the traffic that you get from Greece.
Hey!
So, Doug.
Awesome, dude.
If you look at your
Thank
stats
you.
and you see somebody from Greece listening a lot, this is the guy. He says, my name is Angelo, and since my early teens, I found myself interested in the case. I remember being 12 years old and watching The Men Who Killed Kennedy before the explosion of interest that came with Oliver Stone's film. All these years, I'm wondering, what is the reason this case has such an effect on people, even people like me, and nobody from other side of the world? First things first, I want to start this by thanking you. I have a health issue, and among other things, I need to exercise more. Don't feel alone, Angelo, so do I. I find myself prolonging my exercise just to conclude an episode of your podcast. Well, good. So we're helping you work out longer. That is amazing.
That's what you need to do, Rob. You need to listen to our podcasts.
Yeah.
See?
What I'm trying to say is that sometimes we affect people's lives in ways we can't even conceive. And for the way you have affected mine, I need to thank you guys. Wow.
Dude, thank you so much for reaching out and letting us know that, Angelo.
Yeah.
It's good to, man, I tell you what, dude, it does my heart good to know you're out there and you're over there in Greece hanging out with us. Thanks, brother.
Now, regarding the case, a couple thoughts. It is clear to me that there was a conspiracy for the murder, and there is a separate ongoing conspiracy for the cover-up. The murderers and those who still cover up the case, in my humble opinion, are not the same people. The one thing that always struck me as peculiar, and I would love to hear your thoughts, is the spectrum of possible killers throughout the research community. Was he the arch enemy of communism, the architect of the embargo on Cuba, and the Soviets wanted him dead? Or was he soft on communism, and that annoyed the patriots? Was he killed by pro-Castro fighters who believed that USA administration wanted Castro dead, and there were assassination attempts on him? Or was he killed by anti-Castro elements who would not accept the Bay of Pigs fiasco and the policy of no interference that could go on for another 5 years?
That is my vote, sir.
Yeah. Was he killed by right wings, or was he killed by left wings? In conclusion, did everyone in 63 want him dead and out of the picture? How on earth is it possible for someone to be equally hated by the extremists of both ends of the spectrum? It's amazing to me that all those contradicting theories seem plausible and also seem to have indications of truth. One can find bits and pieces here and there to support each and every one of the aforementioned theories. But in terms of the controversy in the research community, I fear that when you strongly believe something, even if you stumble across evidence that things are not the way you thought, you find it hard to accept that you must change path. That is why I think Jim Garrison had but lost a great chance. He didn't adapt. He had a premise that Oswald is totally innocent and the crime was carried out by the deep government, and said, okay, get me data and witnesses that fit in that scenario.
Yep.
Finally, and sorry for the lengthy email, there's a saying here in Greece, which more or less means that in every situation, there's a Greek guy involved, one way or another, son of a bitch. And in our case, that guy is Mr. Joanides. A very interesting guy,
Yep.
I believe. Again, I thank you for all your hard work. I strongly believe that the mixture of people you describe are actually involved, and I wish that someday this event will be recognized for what it was, a statement and a declaration of power. Angelos, my man.
Angelos, you made my day, brother. That's great. That was great. Man, I think that there were elements of certain subgroups of these right wings, mafia guys, hard right, anti-Castro guys, and a couple of CIA guys got together and engineered the murder plot, and everybody else, out of self-preservation, had to engineer the cover-up plot. So I think you and I are pretty alike in our thinking, sir. And again, thank you so much for the kind words, man. Appreciate it. You're going to love this show if you like working out, too, because it's a long one. Wow.
Yeah, you might lose 10 pounds, but in this one.
Ooh-wee.
And to answer your question, why this case has such an effect on people like you that are on the other side of the world that weren't even alive when this happened is a testament to the kind of man that JFK was.
Yep.
He was a great man, a great leader, a great president, a friend of the world, a man who wanted peace in our time and tried to avoid war and killing at all costs. And that kind of behavior and leadership is respected and endeared throughout the world, given the state of affairs we're in now.
Exactly.
We're sorely lacking someone of his caliber and ilk, and have been since 1963. So
And
that's
I think
why.
You combine what Rob said about the character of the man with the manner in which they arrogantly and brutally shot him down in the street like a dog. And
tie that together with the fact that this is a mystery wrapped in a riddle inside of an enigma. Everybody loves a great mystery. Everybody loves to try to solve the puzzle and put the pieces together. That's not just an American trait. That's not just a Greek trait. That's not just a British trait or Australian trait. It is a human trait, one that endears across our species. So I think all that together is what makes people around the world interested in this case, still to this day.
That's right, man. That's right. Dude, thank you so much for that email. Oh, and by the way, Greek-style pizza is my favorite, Angelos, 100%.
Greek sex is not.
Rob, you had to go there, Rob. Always with the innuendo with this guy.
I stay out of the Roman bathhouses, bud.
Oh wow, this has been a great one, long one. Mike slipped off.
Mike, see Dean Andrews and Jim Garrison strolling through the bathhouse.
I don't need to see
naked.
that. I don't. David Ferry and Clay Shaw in the bathhouse together. I don't need to see that either. No. Oh man.
No.
Oh man. Well, Rob, dude, I don't think we could. I was almost going to say we can't do any more damage, but I shouldn't say that. We can't impart any more knowledge. I think we've done our part for this month. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, bam, another one in the books.
I heard that. Another one in the books. Dude, thank you so much for doing this. And thank you, Mr. Mike Swanson. Rob,
yes.
Would you like to kick us off in wrapping this thing up? And I'll start the music.
Surely.
There it is.
Yeah, for all things Mike Swanson, be sure you check it out, wallstreetwindow.com.
Absolutely.
And look for his books on Amazon and get yourself some. Thank you, Mike, for coming on the show and doing it with us. It was much appreciated and some good insight learned. For me, all things The Lone Gunman Podcast. Check me out on Twitter at The Lone Gunman 7. Check out the Facebook page, The Lone Gunman Podcast. Just search for it. And if you want to hear the show, just Google it. Take you somewhere where you can listen, I'm sure. Or just listen wherever you're listening to this. Jackass. Doug?
That's right. That's me. Not the jackass part, but I'm Doug. And I don't know, Rob, has he ever called me that? Probably. And you can follow, play, download, listen to, and absorb my solo assassination research podcast, The Dallas Action, presented by Wall Street Window, everywhere you find quality podcasts, guys. everywhere. It is forward
Except
moving.
iTunes.
Except iTunes. That's right. Everywhere but iTunes. Forward moving and forward thinking study and analysis of the people, places, things, events, and ideas related to the conspiracy to assassinate President John F. Kennedy. Another fine historical research podcast by Drop D Podcast Productions in the heart of Music Row, Music City, USA. So for Rob Clark and Michael Swanson, this is Doug Campbell saying, tune in again next time, guys, when, upon being asked to provide actual proof that L. Fletcher Prouty ever in his life actually knew the CIA's George Joannides, we'll hear James DiEugenio say,
I can't.
we are out.
Peace, motherfuckers.
Come on!